Welcome to Mr. Bellico. I am your guide into the unexplained darkness of America's wilderness. Park rangers venture into the deep forests at night. Many never return the same. The Wendigo hunts Appalachian hollows, speaking in your brother's voice. The Skinwalker walks on two legs where no animal should. The knot deer stands twisted on ridgelines, watching. The fleshgate steals your screams and whispers them back. These are not myths. These are documented accounts. Ranger incident reports filed away, testimonies from those who encountered something that rewrote their understanding of fear itself. The ancient things that predate civilization still hunt these parks. I am Bellico. These are the stories they do not want you to hear. The ones that prove the wilderness protects something far older and far hungrier than us. Lock your doors and never hike alone after dark. Welcome, everyone. Let the nightmare begin. I never planned to become a park ranger in the most remote corner of Alaska's Denali wilderness. The job listing appeared while I scrolled through positions one sleepless night in my cramped Seattle apartment. Wilderness Ranger. Remote outpost. Experienced hikers only. The isolation appealed to me immediately. 3 months away from civilization, monitoring wildlife and assisting the occasional lost hiker. Perfect. My grandfather was Athabascan, though I knew little of that heritage growing up. He called me Askuk, snake in his language, for my ability to move silently through the woods during our rare hunting trips. It seemed fitting to reclaim that name now, leaving behind my birth name and the life that had become unbearable after the accident. The helicopter dropped me at Taiga Station on a bitter April morning. Snow still blanketed the ground in patches, and the wind cut through my supposedly weather-resistant jacket like it was made of paper. The station was more generous than the job description's rustic accommodations had implied. A sturdy log cabin with solar panels, a radio system, and enough supplies to last through my posting. Previous ranger left in a hurry, the pilot shouted over the rotor noise as he unloaded my gear. Said something about voices in the trees. Happens to some folks out here. Isolation plays tricks. He tapped his temple meaningfully before ducking back into the helicopter. Before the sound of the rotors faded entirely, a deep silence settled over the landscape. Not even the wind moved through the black spruce trees surrounding the cabin. I examined my new home, methodically unpacking supplies and checking off inventory lists. The previous ranger had left detailed logbooks, trail maps, and wildlife population counts. Everything seemed in order except for the last 2 weeks of entries, which were filled with increasingly erratic handwriting. On the final page, a single line repeated, "It's watching from the trees." I chalked it up to isolation sickness. The wilderness can break the unprepared. At nightfall, I built a fire in the cabin's potbelly stove and plotted out tomorrow's hiking route, a 6-mile loop to check trail conditions and wildlife activity near Eagle Creek. That first night I woke suddenly. The cabin was freezing despite the stove. A sound, something between a whistle and a human voice, came from just outside my window. I grabbed my flashlight and peered outside. Nothing but darkness and the looming silhouettes of spruce trees. Just the wind, I told myself, though deep down I knew the air was perfectly still. The next morning brought clear skies and a foot patrol along the Eagle Creek Trail. I documented fresh bear tracks, recorded spring bird migrations, and collected water samples from the creek, normal ranger duties. Everything felt right during daylight. It wasn't until dusk, as I made my way back to the cabin, that the first genuine sense of unease settled over me. The forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no rustling underbrush, not even insects. Every instinct screamed danger. I quickened my pace, scanning the forest edge. That's when I saw it, a figure standing motionless between two distant trees. Too tall and thin to be human, too still to be an animal. When I blinked, it was gone. Back at the cabin, I radioed headquarters for my daily check-in, careful not to mention what I'd seen. They'd think I was hallucinating like my predecessor. Instead, I reported the day's findings and asked casually about any missing hikers in the region. "Actually, yes," came the response through static. "Couple went missing last month. Search was called off after 2 weeks. Presumed wildlife encounter." I asked where they'd last been seen. 3 miles north of your position, near what locals call the Shadow Basin." That night, I dreamed of being hunted through endless forest by something that wore human skin like an ill-fitting suit. A week passed with the same pattern. Days of normal ranger activities, maintaining trail markers, recording wildlife sightings, assisting the occasional backpacker. But as darkness fell, the feeling of being watched intensified. I began seeing the figure more frequently, always at the periphery of my vision, always gone when I turned to look directly. I searched through the logbooks of previous rangers, looking for similar accounts. Most entries were mundane documentation of weather patterns and wildlife movements. But scattered throughout, especially in winter logs, were references to unusual activity near Shadow Basin and unexplained tracks. One ranger from 3 years back had written, "Local Athabascan guides refuse to enter Shadow Basin. Say it belongs to the one who walks between worlds." The native peoples of this region had stories of creatures that could take human form. Skinwalkers, they called them in the Southwest. Up here, they had different names but similar legends. Beings that were once human but had given up their humanity for power. Shapeshifters that hungered for human flesh. I'd heard stories from my grandfather about similar creatures. In Navajo beliefs, they called them Yi-Naldlushi, those who walk on all fours. Many native cultures believed these beings were once respected medicine men or shamans who broke sacred taboos, often by killing family members, to gain dark supernatural powers. They were feared for their ability to transform into animals, particularly wolves, coyotes, bears, and owls. The next day, I contacted a native elder in the nearest village via radio, careful with my words. I explained I was researching local folklore for the park's cultural preservation records. "We do not speak of such things," the elder said firmly, "but I will tell you this. Stay away from Shadow Basin, especially at night. Some places in the wilderness belong to others." I asked if there had been any traditional ways to protect oneself. A long silence followed before he answered. Cold iron burns them, and they cannot enter a dwelling uninvited. That night, I placed my camp hatchet, made of carbon steel, beside my bed. I checked every lock twice and stuffed towels under the door. Sleep came in restless bursts, each dream filled with pursuing shadows and animal eyes reflecting unnaturally in the darkness. 2 more weeks passed. The radio reports mentioned more hikers gone missing in surrounding areas. Search parties found nothing but strange, unidentifiable tracks that seemed to shift between human and animal. Then came the night of the storm. Thunder rattled the cabin's windows as rain lashed against the walls. The power flickered once, twice, then died completely. I lit the emergency lanterns and huddled by the stove, feeling more isolated than ever before. A knock came at the door, 3 precise taps. "Hello?" I called, heart hammering. "Who's there?" "Help me," came a voice, high, desperate. "I'm lost. My partner and I got separated. The storm—" Every instinct screamed danger. I approached the door cautiously, hatchet in hand. "What's your name?" I called. "Please," the voice whimpered. "I'm so cold." I peered through the window beside the door. A figure stood there, hunched against the rain. Their face was obscured by a hood, but something seemed wrong with their proportions. Their arms hung too long at their sides, their shoulders hunched at an impossible angle. "Wait there," I said. "I'll radio for help." As I turned toward the radio, the figure outside began to change. Even through the rain-streaked glass, I could see its body contorting, lengthening. The hood fell back, revealing not a human face, but something stretched between human and animal, with 2 large eyes reflecting the lantern light like mirrors. It smiled, too many teeth. "Askuk," it said, using my grandfather's name for me. "Let me in." I backed away from the window, gripping the hatchet so tightly my knuckles whitened. The creature outside tilted its head at an unnatural angle, studying me through the glass. "I know you, Askuk," it said, its voice now a rasping parody of human speech. "I've watched you since you arrived." "What do you want?" I managed to ask, my mouth dry with fear. "Company," it answered simply. "It gets lonely in these woods." Thunder crashed and lightning illuminated the yard. For an instant I saw its true form, a twisted amalgamation of human and wolf, standing upright on hind legs bent the wrong way, its forelimbs long and ending in clawed hands. Its face remained caught between transformations, elongated jaw, human eyes, ears pointed and tufted with fur. When the lightning faded, a perfectly normal-looking man stood at my window, except for the eyes. They remained animal, reflecting the light unnaturally. "The others invited me in," it said conversationally. "The ranger before you, and the one before him. They were curious. Humans always are." I glanced at the logbooks on my desk, understanding their frantic final entries. "What happened to the missing hikers?" I asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it. The skinwalker's mouth stretched into another too-wide smile. "They fed the wilderness, as all things do eventually." I edged toward the radio, keeping my eyes on the creature. It watched me, amused. "They won't hear you," it said. "The storm has cut the signal. We are alone, you and I." Its claws scraped against the window glass, leaving deep scratches in their wake. The sound set my teeth on edge. "You cannot stay in there forever," it said. "Sooner or later you will need to leave, and I am patient. I have waited in these woods for generations." I gripped the hatchet tighter, remembering the elder's words. Cold iron burns them. But could I really fight this thing? It was faster, stronger, and knew these woods far better than I did. The creature began to circle the cabin, testing windows, rattling the doors. I moved from room to room, keeping it in sight, never turning my back to any entrance. This continued for hours, a psychological war of attrition. Near dawn, the rain finally stopped. In the east, the sky lightened imperceptibly. The skinwalker had fallen silent, and I couldn't see it at any of the windows. Had it left? I doubted it. More likely it was waiting, conserving its energy for when I eventually had to emerge. I spent the day reinforcing the cabin, checking locks, boarding windows, taking inventory of my supplies. I had enough food for 2 weeks if I rationed carefully. Water would last about the same if I collected rainwater as backup. The radio remained silent despite my attempts to contact headquarters. Either the storm had damaged something or the skinwalker had deliberately sabotaged my communications. As night fell again, the scratching resumed, this time from the roof, slow, methodical scraping, as if it were trying to dig its way in. "I can smell your fear," it called down through the chimney, its voice echoing in the stovepipe. "It's intoxicating." I sat with my back against the wall, hatchet in my lap, listening to it work. The sound moved from the roof to the walls, then under the floorboards, as if it were testing every possible entry point. On the third day, I realized I couldn't wait any longer. Either I would be trapped until I starved, or I would have to make a run for it. The nearest ranger station was 12 miles south. If I left at dawn and moved quickly, I might make it before nightfall. I packed a small bag with essentials: water, energy bars, first aid supplies, and a handheld GPS unit. I tucked my satellite phone into my pocket, though it hadn't been able to connect since the storm. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten when I eased open the cabin door, hatchet gripped tightly in my right hand. The air was crisp and still, heavy with the after-rain smell of wet earth and pine. I scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. No sign of the skinwalker. This was my chance. I took a deep breath and sprinted for the southern trail. I'd made it perhaps 50 yards when I heard it, a low growl from the underbrush to my right. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I pushed harder, legs pumping, lungs burning. Behind me, something crashed through the forest. Not with the grace of a natural predator, but with the deliberate, terrifying pursuit of a hunter that knows its prey cannot escape. The trail narrowed as it descended into a ravine. I skidded down the muddy path, using trees to control my descent. At the bottom ran a swollen creek, its waters brown and churning with storm runoff. I splashed across at the shallowest point, the cold water shocking my system into even higher alertness. The opposite bank was steep, but exposed roots provided handholds as I scrambled upward. Only when I reached the top did I risk looking back. The skinwalker stood on the opposite bank. In daylight, it had assumed a more complete animal form, a massive wolf with unnaturally long limbs. But its eyes remained unchanged, human eyes in an animal face filled with malevolent intelligence. We stared at each other across the ravine. Then, deliberately, it began to cross the creek, never breaking eye contact. I turned and ran deeper into the forest. The trail here was less defined, overgrown in places. Several times I had to check the GPS to ensure I was still heading south. The day wore on, and I maintained a punishing pace, stopping only briefly to drink water and catch my breath. Each time I paused, I could hear it moving through the forest behind me, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, but always there. By mid-afternoon, my legs were leaden, and sweat soaked my clothes despite the cool air. The GPS showed I'd covered nearly 8 miles, only 4 more to go. The trail began to climb again, winding up a steep hillside. At the top, I stumbled into a clearing and froze. Ahead lay Shadow Basin, a perfectly circular depression in the earth, perhaps half a mile across. No trees grew within it. The ground was bare dirt, cracked and gray like ash. I checked the GPS again. The ranger station lay directly on the other side of the basin. To go around would add hours to my journey, hours I didn't have with nightfall approaching. A twig snapped in the forest behind me. Decision made, I started across the basin. The silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind. The dirt crunched beneath my boots, releasing a faint scent of sulfur. I kept my eyes fixed on the far side, trying not to think about how exposed I was. I'd made it halfway when the ground began to vibrate beneath my feet. Faint at first, then stronger, like a distant earthquake. I quickened my pace, but the soft dirt dragged at my feet. Behind me, at the edge of the basin where I'd entered, the Skinwalker emerged from the trees. It had shed its wolf form and now stood upright, a terrible amalgamation of human and beast. Its body was gaunt, ribs visible beneath taut, grayish skin. Its legs bent backward at the knee like a wolf's hind legs. Its arms hung nearly to the ground, ending in long-fingered hands with black claws. The head was wolf-like, but with a human's eyes and 2 wide mouth filled with needle teeth. It howled, a sound that started as a wolf's cry but ended in human laughter. Then it charged. I ran faster than I'd ever moved, the hatchet clutched in my hand like a talisman. The far edge of the basin seemed impossibly distant. The vibrations beneath my feet intensified. Cracks appeared in the earth, widening as I passed. Behind me, the Skinwalker's footfalls grew louder, closer. 20 yards from the edge of the basin, I risked a glance back. The Skinwalker was mere feet behind me, its hand outstretched to grab me. But beyond it, the center of the basin had begun to collapse, earth falling away into a growing chasm. I hurled myself forward in a desperate sprint. The Skinwalker's claws grazed my back, tearing through my jacket. I reached the edge of the basin and scrambled up the embankment, roots and rocks cutting my hands. Behind me, the Skinwalker screamed, a sound of rage and frustration. When I looked back, I saw why. The ground beneath it had given way, and it was sliding toward the center of the basin where a massive sinkhole had opened. The creature clawed at the crumbling earth, trying to pull itself toward solid ground, but the collapse spread too quickly. Our eyes met one final time before it slid into the darkness, its scream echoing up from the depths. I didn't wait to see more. Night was falling, and I still had 2 miles to go. I followed the GPS through the gathering darkness, finally seeing the lights of the ranger station through the trees. They found the other missing hikers 2 days later, their remains scattered through the forest surrounding Shadow Basin. Of the Skinwalker, there was no sign, just a massive sinkhole where the basin had been, too deep for the search team's equipment to measure. I filed my report, carefully omitting any mention of what I'd actually seen. Instead, I attributed the deaths to animal attacks and the geological event at Shadow Basin to the recent storm. No one questioned it. No one wanted to. I completed my 3-month posting and didn't renew my contract. But sometimes, on dark nights when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear a howl that starts as animal and ends as human laughter. And I know it's still out there, waiting in the darkness between the trees, patient as the wilderness itself. I never should have gone to Manitou Lake. That's what I tell myself as I sit here in the darkness, listening to the sounds of something moving just beyond the reach of our dying campfire. The others are sleeping now, or pretending to. I don't blame them. Sometimes ignorance, even feigned ignorance, is the only shield we have against terror. 3 days ago, I was excited about this trip, a chance to disconnect, to experience the remote wilderness of northern Idaho with my oldest friend Kai from Canada and his cousin Lachlan, who had flown in from Sydney. We'd planned this trip for months, A 7-day backcountry adventure through what the locals called the Forgotten Range, a remote section of mountains nestled at the border of Idaho and Montana. "You're going where?" my coworker had asked when I requested the time off. "Manitou? Isn't that some kind of Native American spirit?" I'd laughed it off. "It's just a name. The place is supposed to be incredible. Pristine wilderness, hardly any visitors. Kai says there's a cabin his family used when he was young." I should have paid more attention to the way the locals in the last town had looked at us when we'd mentioned our destination. The gas station attendant, an older man with leathery skin and eyes that had seen too much, had paused while counting our change. "Manitou Lake," he'd repeated. "That's Blackfoot territory. Sacred ground." He'd pushed our change across the counter with a slight tremor in his hands. "You boys be careful up there. Stay on the trails." Kai had dismissed him with a casual wave. "My dad used to take me there as a kid, it's fine." "When was the last time you were there?" the attendant had asked. "About 15 years ago, I guess." The man had just nodded slowly. Things change. Now, as I sit huddled against the base of a massive pine tree, I wonder what exactly he'd meant by that. Had he known what stalked these woods? Had he been trying to warn us? We'd reached the trailhead late that first afternoon. The road had deteriorated into little more than a rutted path, forcing us to park Kai's SUV in a small clearing nearly 2 miles from where we'd planned. Already we were off schedule, but nobody seemed concerned. We'd shouldered our packs, checked our GPS, and headed into the forest with the confidence of men who believed technology would always keep them safe. The first night had been uneventful. We'd hiked about 4 miles in before making camp in a small meadow. Lachlan had marveled at the vastness of the American wilderness. "Nothing like this back home," he'd said, his Australian accent growing thicker as he relaxed by the fire. "I mean, we have the outback, but this is different. These trees feel ancient." Kai had nodded, poking at the fire with a stick. "My dad used to talk about that. Said the Blackfoot believed these forests were alive in a way most people couldn't understand." I remember gazing up at the canopy then, at the way the massive trees seemed to bend inward as if listening to our conversation. The stars had been brilliant that night, piercing through gaps in the branches overhead like eyes watching from another world. "What else did your dad tell you about this place?" I'd asked. Kai had fallen silent, staring into the flames. "Not much. He wasn't big on stories. But he did say there were places up here where the boundary between worlds gets thin." "What's that supposed to mean?" Lachlan had laughed. "I don't know, man. Native stuff, I guess. My grandmother was part Kootenai." Kai had shrugged. "Dad just said to respect the place. Leave offerings at certain spots." "Like what kind of offerings?" I'd pressed. "Tobacco, mainly. Sometimes food." "For what?" Lachlan had asked. Kai had looked uncomfortable. "For whatever's out there." I remember how the fire had seemed to dim at that moment, how the sounds of the forest had quieted to an unnatural stillness. None of us had said anything more about it that night. The second day had been when things started to change. We'd hiked deeper into the wilderness, following a faint trail that Kai swore would lead us to the cabin. The forest had grown denser, the trees older and more gnarled. Twice we'd had to backtrack when the trail simply vanished, swallowed by undergrowth or deliberately obscured. I couldn't tell which. "This doesn't look right," Kai had admitted around midday. "It's been a long time, but I remember the path being clearer." "Maybe there was a storm," Lachlan had suggested. "Fallen trees, landslides, that sort of thing can change a landscape." I'd pulled out the map, trying to match our surroundings to the contour lines and landmarks. "According to this, the lake should be about 3 miles northwest. If we keep heading in that direction, we should hit it regardless of the trail." That had been our first mistake. Leaving the trail. By late afternoon, we'd begun to realize we had a problem. The terrain had become increasingly difficult. Steep ravines and dense thickets forcing us to detour again and again. When we'd checked the GPS, our position made no sense. According to the device, we'd been walking in circles despite maintaining a constant heading. "That's impossible," I'd said, shaking the unit as if that might fix it. "We've been going northwest all day." Kai had pulled out his compass, frowning as the needle spun lazily, refusing to settle. "Weird. Maybe there's magnetic ore in these mountains? I should have recognized the signs then. I'd read stories online about places where technology fails, where compasses spin and GPS signals scramble, places where the natural laws seem to bend. The old stories call them thin places, where the barrier between our world and others weakens. As the sun had begun to set, we'd found ourselves in a small clearing. With no better options, we'd made camp for the second night. That was when I first noticed the tracks. They'd circled our campsite, large impressions in the soft earth that resembled deer tracks but were somehow wrong. Too large, too deep, with an occasional impression that looked almost like a human heel. "What do you make of these?" I'd asked Kai, who'd spent more time hunting with his father than I ever had. He'd crouched down, running his fingers along the edge of one print. "Deer, maybe elk," he'd said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "They look weird," I'd pressed. "Almost like they're just deer tracks." He'd cut me off, standing abruptly. "Probably followed us hoping for food." I'd let it drop, but I'd noticed how Kai had insisted on building a larger fire that night, how he'd positioned his sleeping bag so he could see into the darkness beyond our camp. None of us slept well. This morning, was it only this morning? We'd awoken to fog. Not the gentle mist that often blankets mountain valleys, but a thick, choking fog that reduced visibility to mere feet. It had seemed to absorb sound as well, creating a bubble of silence around us that felt artificial, imposed. "We should wait it out," I'd suggested. "Hiking in this would be asking to get lost." "We're already lost," Kai had replied grimly. "And I don't like sitting here." In the end, we'd compromised, waiting until midday when the fog had lifted slightly before breaking camp. That's when Lachlan had found the markers. Small arrangements of sticks and stones placed in patterns that were clearly deliberate. 3 sticks forming a triangle with stones at each point. They'd been set at regular intervals around our campsite just beyond the clearing. "Did either of you make these?" Lachlan had asked, nudging one with his boot. Both Kai and I had shaken our heads. "Maybe it's trail markers," I'd suggested without conviction. "Left by other hikers." "Or warnings," Kai had muttered under his breath. Then louder, "We should get moving. I think I recognize where we are now. The lake can't be far." He'd been right about that much. We'd found Manitou Lake by mid-afternoon, a perfect mirror of dark water nestled in a valley between 2 ridges. From our vantage point on the hillside, we could see the cabin Kai had promised, a small, weathered structure on the far shore. "See? Told you I'd find it," Kai had said, visibly relieved. "That's the place your family used?" Lachlan had asked skeptically. "Looks abandoned." Even from a distance, I could see that the cabin had seen better days. The roof sagged in the middle, and what might once have been a dock jutted broken and twisted into the water. "It's been a while," Kai had admitted, "but it'll be shelter. Better than the tents if it rains." We'd made our way down to the lakeshore, picking our way through dense underbrush. The lake itself had been unnervingly still, its dark surface reflecting the clouds above like a perfect mirror. No fish jumped, no insects skimmed the surface. The silence had been complete, save for our own movements. "It's beautiful," Lachlan had said, but his voice had held a note of unease that matched my own growing discomfort. As we'd followed the shoreline toward the cabin, I'd begun to notice small details that heightened my sense that something was wrong. Dead fish lined the shore in places, their white bellies turned skyward. The trees nearest the water had a sickly appearance, their leaves yellowed and sparse. "What happened here?" I'd asked. Kai had shaken his head. "I don't know. It wasn't like this before." When we'd reached the cabin, our hopes for comfortable shelter had evaporated. The door had hung askew on rusted hinges, and the single window was shattered, its frame harboring a large wasp nest. Inside, the floor had been littered with debris, fallen ceiling plaster, animal droppings, moldering furniture. "We can clean it up," Kai had insisted, though his face betrayed his disappointment. "I'd rather sleep in the tent," Lachlan had said, wrinkling his nose at the musty smell that permeated the space. That's when I'd noticed the markings on the walls. At first I'd thought they were just water stains or mold patches, but as my eyes had adjusted to the dim light, I'd seen that they formed patterns, crude drawings made with what looked like charcoal or ash, stick figures surrounding a larger antlered shape, triangles and spirals, a crude representation of the lake with something emerging from its center. "Kai," I'd called, my voice catching. Were these here before? He'd come to stand beside me, his breath catching audibly when he saw what I was looking at. No, he'd said quietly. Someone's been here. Kids, probably, Lachlan had suggested. Teenagers come out here to party, mess around. Yeah, Kai had agreed too quickly. That must be it. We'd spent an hour cleaning the worst of the debris from the cabin, but as dusk approached, none of us had wanted to sleep inside. Instead, we'd set up our tents near the shore, building a fire in a ring of stones that looked recently used. And now night has fallen completely. The fire casts dancing shadows on the trunks of the surrounding pines. The lake is a void of darkness beyond, occasionally reflecting the glimmer of stars when the clouds part. Kai and Lachlan retreated to their tents hours ago, but sleep eludes me. Because I've been hearing things. Movement in the underbrush that doesn't sound like any animal I recognize. A rhythmic tapping from the direction of the cabin. And twice now, I'm certain I've seen eyes reflecting the firelight from the tree line. Not at ground level where a coyote or wolf might lurk, but higher up, as if whatever watches us stands on two legs. I tell myself it's nothing. Just the natural sounds of a forest at night, distorted by anxiety and unfamiliar surroundings. But I can't shake the feeling that we're being watched, assessed, that we've intruded somewhere we don't belong, and the rightful inhabitant is preparing to reclaim its territory. The fire pops loudly, sending a shower of sparks into the night air. In that brief flare of light, I see it, a figure at the edge of the trees, tall and thin, with a head that seems wrong somehow, elongated or adorned. It stands perfectly still, and though I cannot make out its face, I know it's looking directly at me. I blink, and it's gone. My heart pounds in my chest as I scramble to my feet, nearly tripping over a root in my haste. I should wake the others, I think. Tell them what I saw. But what exactly did I see? A deer, standing oddly. A trick of the shadows and my tired mind. I add another log to the fire, watching as the flames devour it hungrily. I will stay awake, I decide. Keep watch until morning. It's only a few more hours. From the direction of the cabin comes that tapping sound again, rhythmic, deliberate, like bone against wood. And from much closer, just behind me, I hear the snap of a twig. I whirl around at the sound, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. For a fleeting moment I catch a glimpse of movement, something ducking behind a massive pine tree. My breath catches in my throat. "Hello?" I call out, my voice embarrassingly thin in the night air. "Is someone there?" No response comes except the sudden hoot of an owl somewhere above me. I sweep the flashlight back and forth, its beam illuminating nothing but ancient trees and dancing shadows. Whatever I thought I saw is gone, if it was ever there at all. I force myself to take a deep breath, to think rationally. We're miles from civilization, in a wilderness area rarely visited. The chances of another person being out here are slim. More likely my exhausted mind is playing tricks on me, transforming ordinary forest movements into phantom threats. Still, I can't shake the feeling of being watched. I make my way to Kai's tent, crouching by the entrance. "Kai," I whisper, then louder, "Kai, wake up." A rustling sound comes from inside, and then the tent flap unzips. Kai peers out, his hair disheveled, eyes blinking against the beam of my flashlight. "What's wrong?" he asks, instantly alert, despite being woken from sleep. "I think there's something out there," I say, feeling suddenly foolish. "I heard noises, saw something moving in the trees." Kai crawls out of his tent, zipping up his jacket against the night chill. "What kind of something?" "I don't know. It was just a shape. But it was big, and it seemed to be watching us." He grabs his own flashlight from inside the tent and scans the tree line. Probably just a deer or elk. Maybe a bear, though they usually avoid camps with fires. It was standing upright, I insist, and there was something wrong with its head, like it had antlers, but not quite. Kai falls silent, his flashlight beam freezing on a spot among the trees. "There," he whispers. "Do you see it?" I follow his gaze, squinting into the darkness. At first, I see nothing. Then a slight movement catches my eye. A shifting of shadows that doesn't match the swaying of branches in the gentle breeze. A darker patch of darkness that seems to absorb the light rather than reflect it. What the hell is that? I breathe. Before Kai can answer, the shape melts away, seeming to sink into the ground or dissolve into the shadows. My skin prickles with goosebumps that have nothing to do with the cool night air. We should wake Lachlan, Kai says, his voice tight. I don't think we should sleep separately tonight. We rouse the Australian, who emerges from his tent grumbling until he sees our faces. What's happened? He asks, instantly serious. Kai explains what we've seen while I rebuild the fire, adding several large logs to create a blaze that pushes back the darkness. The three of us sit close to the flames, backs to one another, so we can watch in all directions. Could be anything, Lachlan says after hearing our story. Your eyes play tricks in the dark. And this place, he gestures at the surrounding forest, it's enough to make anyone jumpy. Maybe, I concede, but I know what I saw. My dad told me stories, Kai says suddenly, his voice low. I didn't want to say anything before because it sounded crazy. Still does. What stories? I prompt when he falls silent. Kai stares into the fire, his face troubled. The Blackfoot and other tribes around here. They believed in creatures they called skinwalkers, shamans or witches who could transform into animals, or something between animal and human. Skinwalkers aren't hapless victims who fell prey to dark magic. They want to be monsters, Kai continues. In Navajo stories, skinwalkers are evil beings, witches, human sorcerers of dark magic, who attain their status by committing specific atrocities such as murdering a family member. Lachlan snorts. Come on, mate. You're not seriously suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, Kai cuts him off. I'm just telling you what the stories say. My grandmother used to warn us about places like this, said there were sacred sites where the barrier between worlds was thin, places humans shouldn't go. A chill runs down my spine that has nothing to do with the night air. And you brought us here anyway? Kai looks defensive. I was a kid when I came here with my dad. We fished, hiked, had a great time. Nothing weird happened. I figured they were just stories to keep kids from wandering too far from camp. Well, they're effective, Lachlan mutters. So what do these skinwalkers supposedly do, besides stare creepily from the woods? They're hunters, Kai says simply. They isolate travelers, confuse them, make them lose their way. Then they pick them off one by one. Great, I say with forced lightness. Anything else we should know? Kai hesitates. They can mimic voices, sound like people you know calling for help. A heavy silence falls over our group. The fire crackles, sending sparks spiraling upward into the night sky. From somewhere in the distance comes a long, low howl that sounds neither fully wolf nor fully human. Just a coyote, Lachlan says, but his voice lacks conviction. We should leave in the morning, I say. First light, head back to the car. Kai nods. I think that's smart. I'm sorry I brought us here, guys. I didn't think. It's not your fault, I interrupt. You couldn't have known. And maybe we're all just freaking ourselves out over nothing. But even as I say the words, I don't believe them. The sense of wrongness has only grown stronger, a pressure against my mind, like the air before a thunderstorm. Should we take turns keeping watch? Lachlan suggests. I'm not sure I could sleep anyway, I admit. We agree to rotate, each taking 2 hours while the others try to rest. Kai takes the first shift while Lachlan and I retreat to our tents. Despite my earlier statement, exhaustion catches up with me quickly, and I find myself drifting into an uneasy sleep. I dream of running through endless trees, pursued by something I cannot see but can feel getting closer with each labored breath. The forest around me seems alive, branches reaching to snag my clothing, roots rising to trip my feet. And always behind me, the soft sound of footsteps, perfectly matching my rhythm until they're so close I can feel hot breath on the back of my neck. I wake with a gasp to find Lachlan shaking my shoulder. Your turn, he whispers. Everything's quiet out there. Too quiet, if you ask me. I check my watch, just past 2 a.m., the darkest part of the night. I grab my jacket and flashlight and crawl out of the tent. The fire has burned lower, but still casts a circle of warm light. Beyond that circle, the darkness seems almost solid. See anything? I ask Lachlan as he prepares to turn in. Nothing moving, he says, but I kept hearing noises from the direction of the cabin. like someone walking around inside. I checked, he adds quickly, seeing my expression. But there was nothing there, just old floorboards settling probably. I nod, not trusting myself to speak. The thought of Lachlan investigating the cabin alone in the dark sends a fresh wave of fear through me. "Wake us if anything happens," he says, then retreats to his tent. Left alone, I add wood to the fire and settle in for my watch. The night presses in around me and I find myself straining to capture every sound. The soft hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, the gentle lapping of water against the lakeshore. Time passes with excruciating slowness. I check my watch repeatedly, dismayed to find that only minutes have elapsed when it feels like hours. To keep myself alert, I stand and pace the perimeter of our camp, sweeping my flashlight through the trees. On my third circuit, I freeze. There, caught in the beam of light, is a set of tracks that weren't there earlier. They look like deer prints but are deeper, as if made by something much heavier, and they lead directly to the edge of our campsite before veering away toward the lake. I follow the tracks cautiously, keeping the tents in sight. They lead to the water's edge and then, impossibly, continue into the lake itself. I shine my light across the dark surface, half expecting to see something staring back, but there's only the gentle ripple of water disturbed by a night breeze. As I turn to head back to camp, something catches my eye. A flicker of movement from the direction of the cabin. I swing my flashlight toward it, and my blood runs cold. Standing in the doorway of the dilapidated structure is a figure. Even at this distance, I can tell it's not human, not entirely. It stands too tall, its proportions wrong, and its head bears what look like antlers, but they're twisted, asymmetrical. For a long moment, neither of us moves. Then, with a deliberate slowness that's somehow more terrifying than any sudden movement would be, the figure raises an arm and points directly at me. I should run. I should wake the others. But I find myself rooted to the spot, unable to do anything but stare at the impossible creature before me. A distant part of my mind wonders if this is just another dream, if I'll wake gasping in my tent with nothing but the normal sounds of the forest around me. Then the figure takes a step forward, and the spell breaks. I stumble backward, nearly falling in my haste to retreat. I turn and run back to our camp, heart pounding in my chest. "Kai, Lachlan," I shout, no longer caring about keeping quiet. "Wake up now!" They emerge from their tents, alarmed by the panic in my voice. "What is it?" Kai demands, reaching for his hunting knife. "By the cabin," I gasp. "I saw it, the Skinwalker. It was watching me." Kai grabs his flashlight and points it toward the cabin. The doorway stands empty now. "There's nothing there," Lachlan says, his voice carrying a hint of irritation. "You're scaring us half to death over shadows." "It was there," I insist. "Tall, with antlers. It pointed right at me." Kai's expression is grim. "I believe you. We need to leave. Now. Not in the morning. Right now." "In the dark?" Lachlan protests. "That's madness. We'll get lost or break an ankle on these trails." "We're already lost," Kai reminds him, "and I'd rather take my chances with the wilderness than wait here for that thing to come back." I nod my agreement. "We can follow the shoreline until dawn, then try to find our way back to the trail. Anything's better than staying here." Lachlan looks between us, then sighs in resignation. "Fine. But if I die falling off a cliff in the dark, I'm coming back to haunt both of you." We pack quickly, taking only essentials and abandoning anything that might slow us down. Within 15 minutes, we're ready to move out, our flashlights cutting thin beams through the darkness. "Stay close," Kai instructs. "If you see or hear anything strange, say something immediately." We set off along the lakeshore, walking as quickly as we dare on the uneven ground. The night seems to close in around us, and sounds carry strangely across the water. More than once, I think I hear footsteps behind us, only to turn and find nothing there. After about half an hour of walking, Lachlan stops abruptly. "Listen," he says, his voice tense. We fall silent, straining our ears. At first I hear nothing unusual, just the rustle of leaves and the soft lapping of water against the shore. Then it comes. A voice, carried on the night breeze. "Help. Please, help me." It's faint but distinctly human, a woman's voice high with distress. Hello? Lachlan calls back. Where are you? Don't, Kai hisses, grabbing his arm. Remember what I told you. They mimic voices. But what if it's someone who needs help? Lachlan argues. We can't just ignore it. The voice comes again, closer now. Please, I'm hurt. Help me. That's not human, Kai insists. There's no one else out here. I shine my flashlight in the direction of the voice, seeing only trees and undergrowth. We should keep moving, I agree with Kai. Whatever it is, I don't think we want to meet it. Lachlan hesitates, then nods reluctantly. Yeah, all right. Let's go. We press on, moving faster now. The voice falls silent for a time, but I can't shake the feeling that we're being followed, that eyes watch our every move from the darkness. The shoreline becomes rockier, forcing us to slow our pace. Ahead, the lake narrows, and the land rises sharply to form a natural choke point. As we approach it, Kai suddenly stops, holding up a hand for us to do the same. What is it? I whisper. He points to the ground before us. In the beam of his flashlight, I can make out more tracks, the same deer-like prints I saw earlier, but interspersed with them are what look unmistakably like human footprints. They weave in and out of each other, as if whatever made them was constantly shifting between forms. It's ahead of us, Kai says quietly. It's cut us off. How is that possible? Lachlan demands. We've been moving fast, and we had a head start. It knows these woods, I say, the realization dawning coldly. It's been driving us in a specific direction, hurting us. The implications settle over us like a physical weight. We're not escaping. We're being corralled. What do we do? Lachlan asks, his earlier skepticism completely gone. Kai scans our surroundings, thinking quickly. We need to get to higher ground. If we can make it to that ridge, he points to a rise about half a mile to our right. We'll have a better vantage point. Maybe see a way out of here. It's our only plan, so we adjust course, moving away from the lakeshore and into the denser forest. The going is tougher here, the ground uneven and often steep. Tree roots reach out like grasping hands, threatening to trip us with each step. We've been climbing for perhaps 20 minutes when Lachlan, who's taken the lead, suddenly curses. The ground drops off ahead, he calls back. Looks like some kind of ravine. We join him at the edge of a sharp declivity. In the dim light of our flashlights, I can make out a steep-sided gulch about 15 feet across and of indeterminate depth. We'll have to go around, I say, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. Dawn still seems hours away, and our progress has been frustratingly slow. Wait, Kai says, pointing. There's something down there. I direct my flashlight where he's indicating. At first, I see nothing but shadows and the suggestion of movement that might just be branches swaying in the breeze. Then my light catches something that makes my heart stutter. A reflection. Eyes staring back at us from the bottom of the ravine. Don't move, Kai whispers. Too late. The creature, whatever it is, has already seen us. I watch, paralyzed with fear, as it begins to climb the far side of the ravine, moving with inhuman speed and grace. In the shifting beam of my flashlight, I catch glimpses of a form that seems to constantly change. Now running on all fours like a deer, now rising upright in a twisted parody of human posture. Run, I manage to choke out. Run! We turn and flee back the way we came, no longer caring about stealth or direction, driven only by the primal urge to escape. Branches whip at our faces, roots catch at our feet, but terror gives us speed and agility we didn't know we possessed. Behind us I hear it coming, a swift rhythmic movement through the undergrowth that gains on us with terrible inevitability. My lungs burn, my legs ache, but I don't dare slow down. Ahead, the trees thin, and I realize we're approaching the lakeshore again. The cabin looms dark against the night sky, and for a wild moment I consider making for it. At least it has walls, a door we might barricade. But as we burst from the tree line, Lachlan suddenly cries out and pitches forward, disappearing from view. I skid to a halt, nearly falling myself, and realize we've reached a steep embankment leading down to a small cove. Lachlan, I call, peering over the edge. In the dim moonlight, I can just make out his form at the bottom, about 10 feet below. I'm okay, he calls back, his voice tight with pain. Twisted my ankle, that's all. Give me a hand. Kai is already scrambling down to help him. I turn to check behind us, half expecting to see the creature emerging from the trees. But the forest edge remains still and silent. Too silent. I follow Kai down the embankment, slipping and sliding on loose dirt and stones. Lachlan is sitting up, grimacing as he tests his injured ankle. Can you walk? I ask urgently. I think so, he says, accepting Kai's hand to pull himself upright. He puts weight on the injured foot and winces but doesn't fall. It's not broken, just sprained. We need to keep moving, Kai says, scanning the top of the embankment nervously. Where to? Lachlan asks. We're just going in circles. He's right, I realize. We've somehow ended up back near our starting point, despite walking for what must be over an hour. The cabin is visible through the trees, its broken silhouette like a jagged wound against the sky. The sun will be up soon, I say, not sure if I'm trying to convince them or myself. If we can just last until dawn. And then what? Lachlan demands. We're still lost. Our GPS isn't working. We don't know which way to go. Before I can respond, a sound reaches us that turns my blood to ice. The voice we heard earlier, but closer now, clear as a bell. Help me, please. I'm hurt. It comes from just beyond the embankment, at the edge of the trees where we had been moments ago. Don't answer it. Kai warns unnecessarily. None of us have any desire to call attention to ourselves now. We press ourselves against the embankment, trying to blend into the shadows. My heart hammers so loudly in my chest that I'm certain it must be audible, a beacon broadcasting our location to the hunter in the night. The voice calls again, but this time it's different, deeper, more masculine. Kai, is that you? Son, I've been looking everywhere for you. I feel Kai stiffen beside me. It sounds like my father, he whispers, his voice hollow with shock. It's not, I remind him, gripping his arm tightly. It can't be. Your dad's been dead for 3 years. The voice changes again, becoming mine. Guys, where are you? I found a way out. A chill runs down my spine at the perfect mimicry. Not just my voice, but my exact intonation, the way I speak when excited. Whatever this thing is, it's been watching us, listening to us, learning how to become us. What do we do? Lachlan whispers, his earlier bravado completely gone. I look around desperately, seeking some escape route. The cove we've landed in is small, with the embankment at our backs and the lake before us. To either side, rocky outcroppings limit our options. We're trapped. Unless... The water, I say suddenly. We can wade along the shoreline. The tracks I saw earlier, they went into the lake but didn't come out. You think it won't follow us into the water? Kai asks. It's worth a try, and even if it does, we might have a better chance than on land. It's a desperate plan, but it's all we have. Lachlan nods grimly, adjusting his pack higher on his shoulders. Lead the way. We slip into the lake as quietly as possible, the cold water sending shock waves through my system. It's deeper than I expected, quickly rising to our waists. The bottom is soft mud that sucks at our boots, making each step an effort. We move slowly along the shoreline, staying close to the bank but deep enough that we're mostly submerged. The water is black in the darkness, and I try not to think about what might be swimming beneath us. Right now, the creature hunting us from the shore is the greater threat. Above us, at the top of the embankment, a shadow appears, taller than a man, with that distinctive antlered silhouette. It stands perfectly still, surveying the cove below. Though I can't see its face, I feel its gaze passing over us like a physical touch. We freeze, hardly daring to breathe. The cold water seeps into my clothing, numbing my lower body, but I barely notice. All my attention is focused on the figure above us. For a long, terrible moment, it remains motionless. Then, with a swift, fluid movement that's more animal than human, it descends the embankment, not climbing down as we did, but seeming to flow like water down the steep slope. It reaches the bottom and pauses at the water's edge, its head tilting as it studies the lake. In the faint light, I catch a glimpse of its face, or what should be a face. Instead, there's what looks like a deer's skull, the empty eye socket somehow blacker than the night around us. Don't move, Kai breathes. the words barely audible. The creature takes a step forward, its foot, cloven like a deer's hoof, touching the water's surface. It pauses, as if testing, then draws back. A low sound emerges from it, not quite a growl, but something older, more primal, the sound of ancient hunger. For several heart-stopping seconds, it remains at the shore, watching us. Then, with the same fluid movement, it turns and melts back into the forest. We wait, hardly daring to believe our luck. The minutes stretch like hours as we strain our ears for any sound of its return. "I think it's gone," Lachlan finally whispers. "For now, at least." "We should keep moving," I say, my teeth beginning to chatter from the cold. "Follow the shoreline until we're well away from here." We continue our slow progress through the water, each step a struggle against the mud and cold. My waterlogged clothes weigh me down, and my fingers are numb where they grip my pack straps. After what seems like an eternity, we reach a point where the shore curves sharply and the embankment gives way to a gentler slope. We clamber out of the lake, our legs wobbling with cold and exhaustion. "We need warmth," Kai says, looking at our shivering forms with concern. "A fire." "Is that safe?" I ask, glancing nervously at the dark forest. "If that thing wanted to take us in the water, it could have," he reasons. "There must be something about it that prevents it from following us there. Maybe it can't swim, or maybe water disrupts whatever power it has. Or maybe it's just toying with us," Lachlan mutters darkly. Despite his pessimism, we all agree that we need to warm up before hypothermia sets in. We find a small clearing about 20 yards from the shore and gather what dry wood we can find under the trees. Soon, a small fire is burning, its heat a blessing against our chilled bodies. As we huddle around the flames, stripping off our sodden outer layers to dry, I notice a faint lightening in the eastern sky. Dawn is approaching at last. The night has seemed eternal, but morning is coming. "What's the plan?" Lachlan asks, voice hollow with exhaustion. "We wait for full light," Kai says. "Then we try to find our way back to the trail, stay together, move as quickly as we can." I nod agreement, too tired to speak. The fire's warmth is seeping into my bones, bringing with it a dangerous drowsiness. I force my eyes to stay open, knowing that to sleep now might mean never waking again. "I've been thinking," Lachlan says after a long silence. "That thing, the Skinwalker, it drives people to isolation, right? Gets them lost, separates them from help." "That's what the stories say," Kai confirms. "So it's intelligent. It has a strategy." Lachlan leans forward, his face serious in the firelight. "What if we turn the tables? Use its own tactics against it?" "What do you mean?" I ask. "I mean, what if we're approaching this all wrong? Running away, hiding. That's what it expects. That's probably what all its victims do." He pauses, gauging our reactions. "What if we hunt it instead?" Kai stares at him like he's lost his mind. "With what? We have one hunting knife between us. You can barely walk. And that thing, whatever it is, knows these woods better than we ever could." "I'm not saying we take it in a fair fight," Lachlan clarifies. "I'm saying we set a trap, use its nature against it." The idea is so outlandish that it takes me a moment to process it. What kind of trap could possibly hold a creature like that? Lachlan grins, a fierce expression in the firelight. "You said it yourself, it wouldn't follow us into the water. That means it has weaknesses, limitations. We just need to figure out what they are and exploit them." I glance at Kai, who looks thoughtful now, rather than dismissive. "My grandmother used to say that skinwalkers could be repelled by certain herbs," he says slowly. "Cedar, sage, and they're supposedly vulnerable to obsidian or silver." "Great," I say, trying to keep the sarcasm from my voice. "Anyone bring a silver bullet or an obsidian knife?" "No," Kai admits. "But the cabin, my dad kept supplies there, old supplies. There might be something we can use." I think of the cabin with its disturbing wall markings and broken door. The last place I want to go is back there. But if there's even a chance, we might find something to give us an edge against the creature hunting us. It's worth a try, I concede. But we wait for full daylight. And we stay together no matter what. Lachlan and Kai nod in agreement. We fall silent, watching as the eastern sky gradually lightens from black to deep blue, then to the pale lavender of approaching dawn. The fire burns low, and I add the last of our gathered wood to the flames, knowing we'll need to move soon. As the first rays of sunlight pierce the trees, painting the lake's surface with gold, I feel a weight lift from my shoulders. We've survived the night. Whatever happens next, we've made it this far. But as I stand to stretch my stiff muscles, I notice something that sends a fresh chill through me despite the growing warmth of the day. There, at the edge of our small clearing, are tracks, the same deer-like prints I've come to dread. They circle our campsite completely, forming a perfect ring around us. And they're fresh, made while we huddled by our fire. The creature wasn't gone after all. It was watching us the entire time, so close we could have reached out and touched it had we known. And now, with daylight spreading across the land, I realize a terrible truth. Night may be the Skinwalker's domain, but daylight doesn't mean safety. Our ordeal is far from over. The morning light reveals the full extent of our predicament. We stand in a small clearing surrounded by dense forest on three sides, with Manitou Lake stretching dark and still before us. The tracks encircling our campsite are unmistakable now in the daylight, large deer-like prints that occasionally elongate into something more human. "It was right here," Lachlan says, crouching to examine the impressions in the soft earth. While we were sitting by the fire, watching us, I suppress a shudder, remembering how we had believed ourselves temporarily safe. The creature could have taken any one of us at any moment. Why didn't it? I ask aloud. It had the perfect opportunity. Kai shakes his head. I don't know. Maybe it's not just hunting for food. Maybe it's... He trails off, unable or unwilling to complete the thought. Playing with us, Lachlan finishes grimly, like a cat with mice. The image is unsettling, but fits what we've experienced, the way we've been herded, corralled, driven in circles back to our starting point. The Skinwalker, if that's truly what it is, seems to be enjoying our fear, prolonging the chase for reasons of its own. We need to get to the cabin, Kai says, stuffing his still damp jacket into his pack. If there's anything there that can help us, we need to find it fast. We break camp quickly, gathering our remaining supplies. Lachlan tests his injured ankle, wincing but declaring it bearable. The three of us set off along the lakeshore, heading back toward the cabin. Despite the daylight, I find myself jumping at every sound, scanning the tree line constantly for any sign of movement. The cabin comes into view after about 20 minutes of walking. It looks even more decrepit in the harsh light of day, the roof sagging dangerously, the walls weathered to a uniform gray. The single window stares like a blind eye, its glass long since shattered. What exactly are we looking for? I ask as we approach. Anything that might be useful? Kai replies. Tools, weapons. My dad was part Kootenai through his mother. He knew the old ways. Kept some traditional items around. If there's anything that might work against a skinwalker, it would be here. We approach the cabin cautiously, alert for any sign of the creature. The door hangs askew on its hinges, moving slightly in the morning breeze with a low creaking sound that sets my teeth on edge. The interior lies in shadow, and I find myself reluctant to cross the threshold. Kai goes first, pushing the door wider and stepping inside. Lachlan and I follow, our eyes taking a moment to adjust to the dimness after the bright morning light. The cabin consists of a single room with a small loft accessible by a ladder that appears too rotted to trust. A stone fireplace dominates one wall, its hearth filled with ancient ash and debris. A wooden table lists to one side in the center of the room, surrounded by the broken remains of what might once have been chairs. Against the back wall stands a massive old dresser, its surface thick with dust. And everywhere, covering nearly every inch of available wall space, are the drawings I noticed the day before. Crude figures rendered in what looks like charcoal or ash. Most depict the same imagery, stick figures fleeing from a larger antlered shape. But there are other symbols too, spirals, triangles, and complex patterns I don't recognize. What is all this? Lachlan asks, gesturing at the drawings. Kai approaches one of the walls, studying the markings closely. These aren't random, he says, his voice hushed. They're symbols, old ones, some I recognize from my grandmother's teachings. He points to a spiral surrounded by dots. This represents a portal or gateway, and these, he indicates a series of interconnected triangles, are protective wards. Someone was trying to defend themselves, I say, the realization dawning coldly. Whoever was here before us knew what was out there. Kai nods grimly, and they left instructions. He traces a sequence of figures that seems to tell a story. Human shapes approaching a lake, then an antlered figure emerging from the water, followed by more symbols, and finally a crude representation of the cabin surrounded by what might be a barrier of some kind. Instructions for what? Lachlan asks, peering over Kai's shoulder. How to survive, Kai says simply, or at least how to keep it at bay. He moves to the dresser, pulling open drawers that stick with disuse. Most contain nothing but mouse droppings and the tattered remains of clothing. But in the bottom drawer, beneath a moldering blanket, he finds something that makes him pause. Here, he says, carefully lifting out a leather pouch. It's old, but well preserved, about the size of his palm. With reverent movements, he unties the thong that keeps it closed and tips the contents into his hand. Several items tumble out. A small carved figure made of some dark wood. A bundle of dried herbs tied with sinew. A handful of what look like polished black stones, and most surprising, a gleaming silver pendant on a leather cord. My father's medicine bundle, Kai says, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't think it would still be here after all these years. What is it for? I ask, approaching to get a better look at the mysterious items. Protection, he says, picking up the silver pendant. It's shaped like a star with 8 points, intricate symbols etched into its surface. This is silver. Skinwalkers are said to be vulnerable to it like werewolves in European folklore. He lifts the dried herbs next. Cedar and sage, for cleansing and warding, and these, he indicates the black stones, are obsidian, another material said to be effective against dark magic. And that? Lachlan points to the carved figure, which resembles a wolf or coyote standing upright. A fetish, Kai explains. A representation of a protective spirit, in this case, coyote. The trickster, but also sometimes a guardian against greater evils. He carefully returns the items to the pouch, then divides them among us. He keeps the wooden fetish for himself, gives me the silver pendant, and hands Lachlan the obsidian stones. The dried herbs he distributes equally. Keep these on you, he instructs. According to the old beliefs, they should offer some protection. I slip the pendant over my head, feeling slightly foolish but unwilling to dismiss anything that might help us survive. The silver feels cool against my skin, and I'm surprised by the immediate sense of comfort it provides. Psychological, surely, but welcome nonetheless. So, what's the plan? Lachlan asks, pocketing the obsidian stones. Hide out here until help comes? Because I have to tell you, I'm not confident anyone's going to find us anytime soon. No, Kai says, studying the wall drawings again. The cabin isn't safe. These markings, they're not just records or instructions. They're warnings. Whatever was here before, it got inside eventually. I think of the unnatural silence that surrounds the cabin, the dead fish we saw along the lakeshore. So we keep moving, try to find our way back to the trail. Kai traces one particular sequence of symbols with his finger. Figures approaching what looks like a mountain or large hill, with the sun directly overhead. I think these might be directions, a way out. Can you read them? Lachlan asks skeptically. Not exactly, Kai admits, but I recognize some of the landscape features. See this? He points to a distinctive shape that could represent a ridge or mountain peak. I think that's Thunder Mountain. It's about 5 miles northeast of here. If we can reach it, we might be able to get our bearings, maybe even find a ranger station. It's not much of a plan, but it's better than waiting for the Skinwalker to return. We quickly search the rest of the cabin for anything useful, finding an old hunting knife in a drawer and what might once have been a map, though water damage has rendered it largely illegible. As we prepare to leave, I notice something I missed before, a trapdoor in the floor, partially hidden beneath the tilting table. Look at this, I call to the others, pushing the table aside with a grating sound. The trapdoor has no handle, just a small hole that might once have held a rope or ring. I use the hunting knife to pry it open, revealing a dark space beneath the cabin. The smell that rises from it is dank, but not unpleasant. Earthy, like a root cellar. I didn't know this was here, Kai says, crouching beside me to peer into the darkness. My dad never mentioned it. I shine my flashlight into the opening, revealing a small underground room about 6 feet square. A crude ladder leads down. The walls appear to be lined with shelves, and I can make out various containers and objects stored there. We should check it out, I say. Might be supplies we can use. Kai looks hesitant but nods. I'll go. You two keep watch. He descends the ladder carefully, testing each rung before putting his full weight on it. The wood creaks, but holds. Once at the bottom, he sweeps his flashlight around the small space. It's some kind of storage cellar, he calls up. There are jars, boxes. Looks like it was stocked for long stays. Anything useful? Lachlan asks, standing guard by the door. Most of it's ruined, Kai replies, examining the shelves. But there's... Wait. He falls silent, and I hear him moving something heavy. You guys need to see this. Curiosity overcomes my caution, and I descend the ladder to join him. The cellar is cool and surprisingly dry, given its location. The shelves that line the walls hold an assortment of preserved goods, jars of what might once have been fruits or vegetables, now unidentifiable masses. Boxes of supplies turned to dust, tools long since rusted. But it's what Kai has uncovered that draws my attention. A wooden chest pushed against the far wall, previously hidden behind a fallen shelf. It's not large, perhaps 2 feet long by 1 foot wide and secured with a simple iron latch rather than a lock. Help me with this, Kai says, and together we lift the chest, carrying it to the ladder and passing it up to Lachlan before climbing out ourselves. In the better light of the cabin, we can see that the chest is carved with symbols similar to those on the walls, protective signs and wards, I assume. Kai opens the latch, and we all lean forward as he lifts the lid. Inside, wrapped in a surprisingly well-preserved piece of buckskin, is a book, or more accurately, a journal. Its leather cover is cracked with age but intact, and the pages, though yellowed, appear readable. Beside it lies a bundle wrapped in red cloth, roughly the size and shape of a large hunting knife. Kai lifts the journal reverently, opening it to the first page. The handwriting is faded but legible, written in a flowing, old-fashioned script. Journal of Thomas Blackwood, 1879, Kai reads aloud. Record of my experiences at Manitou Lake and observations of the entity known to the natives as Wendigo. Wendigo, I repeat. I thought we were dealing with a skinwalker. Kai flips through several pages, scanning quickly. Different tribes had different names for similar creatures, he explains. Wendigo, skinwalker, flesh-eater, they all describe beings that were once human, but transformed into something other. He continues reading excerpts aloud. June 12, 1879. I have established my cabin on the shores of what the Blackfoot call Manitou Lake, Spirit Lake. Despite warnings from local tribes, I am determined to investigate the disappearances that have plagued this region. 3 trappers missing in the past year, all last seen near these waters. Kai turns more pages. June 20th. Strange tracks observed around the cabin. Not quite deer, not quite human. The silence here is unnatural. No birds sing, no insects buzz. Only at night does one hear sounds. Movement in the brush, whispers that might be the wind, but seem to form words just beyond comprehension. A chill runs down my spine at the parallels to our own experiences. Kai continues to another entry. July 3rd. I have seen it. God help me. I have seen the creature that haunts this place. It emerged from the lake at dusk, water streaming from antlers that no natural deer could bear. It stood upright like a man but moved with the grace of a predator. It saw me watching from the cabin window and approached. I have drawn protective symbols as instructed by my Kootenai guide, but I fear they will not hold indefinitely. Kai skips ahead several pages. July 15th. It speaks now, using voices it should not know, my wife's, my son's. It calls to me in the night, begging me to open the door, to come outside. The isolation wears on my nerves. I begin to wonder if I am going mad, if all I have seen is the product of a mind affected by solitude and fear. July 24th. I have discovered its nature, I believe. Not Skinwalker as the Navajo would describe, nor quite the Wendigo of Algonquin lore, though it shares aspects of both. The Kootenai call it Nyatu, the soul stealer. It feeds not merely on flesh, but on fear, on isolation, on despair. It hunts by separating its prey from help or hope, by breaking them mentally before it takes them physically. I exchange glances with Lachlan, seeing my own unease reflected in his eyes. Kai finds a later entry. August 2nd. I have learned how to repel it, at least temporarily. Silver pains it, as does obsidian. The sacred herbs, sage, cedar, sweetgrass, create boundaries it cannot easily cross. But most effective is water. Natural running water seems to confuse its senses, mask the fear it tracks so effectively. I have taken to wading the stream daily, obscuring my trail and my emotional emanations. This confirms our earlier discovery that the creature wouldn't follow us into the lake. Kai flips to near the end of the journal, where the handwriting becomes increasingly erratic. August 18th. It grows bolder. Twice now it has tested the barriers I have established around the cabin. The symbols no longer keep it at bay as effectively. I fear my time here grows short. I have created a weapon, a blade of silver mixed with obsidian dust, blessed by methods the Kootenai elder taught me. Whether it will prove effective, I cannot say. No one has ever wounded such a creature and lived to record the event. August 20th. In what may be my final entry, I record what the elder told me of this creature's origin. Once human, a shaman who sought power through forbidden rituals, the consumption of human flesh, communion with spirits of the earth's dark places. The transformation was gradual but complete. It can be killed, the elder insisted, but only by severing the connection between what it was and what it has become. The heart must be pierced with silver while the creature is in its transitional state, neither fully human nor fully beast. Kai closes the journal, his expression grave. There are no more entries after that. So Blackwood didn't make it, Lachlan says quietly. Maybe not, I say, but he left this. I reach for the cloth-wrapped bundle still in the chest. It feels heavy in my hands as I carefully unwrap it. Inside is exactly what Blackwood's journal described, a knife, longer and heavier than a typical hunting knife, with a blade that gleams silvery in the dim light. The handle is wrapped in leather, and set into the pommel is a smooth black stone that can only be obsidian. Strange symbols are etched along the blade's length, similar to those covering the cabin walls. He made a weapon, I say, turning the knife carefully in my hands. The balance is perfect, the edge still remarkably sharp despite the passage of years. A weapon designed specifically to kill the creature that's hunting us, Kai says, his voice hushed with something like reverence. If you believe all this, Lachlan says, though his skepticism sounds forced now, after all we've witnessed. A magic knife to kill a mythological monster. You have a better explanation for what's been happening? I challenge. For what we've seen. He shakes his head, conceding the point. So what now? We go hunting for this thing? Try to kill it? No, Kai says firmly. We stick to the plan, make for Thunder Mountain, try to reach safety. The knife is a last resort if it corners us. I carefully rewrap the blade and stow it in my pack, along with Blackwood's journal. The additional weight is negligible compared to the psychological boost of having some means of defense against the creature. We should go, I say, glancing at the window where sunlight streams through the broken pane. Make the most of the daylight. We gather our supplies, including some preserved items from the cellar that still seem usable, dried meat of some kind that has remained surprisingly intact in sealed glass jars, a canteen that proves to be watertight once cleaned. Before leaving, Kai takes a handful of the dried herbs from his share and crumbles them into the fireplace, lighting them with his lighter. Fragrant smoke rises, filling the cabin with a sharp, clean scent. Cleansing, he explains, and it might mask our scent trail for a while. We exit the cabin into the bright midday sun, its warmth a stark contrast to the cool dankness inside. The lake stretches before us, deceptively peaceful in the daylight. Thunder Mountain is visible in the distance, its distinctive peak rising above the surrounding forest. 5 miles as the crow flies, Kai says, orienting himself. Probably closer to 7 with the terrain we'll have to cross. We can make it by nightfall if we keep a good pace, I say, trying to sound more confident than I feel. Lachlan tests his injured ankle, wincing slightly but nodding. I'll manage. We set off, skirting the lake's eastern shore before turning northeast toward the mountain. The terrain is challenging, rocky outcroppings, dense underbrush, and occasional boggy areas that force us to detour, but we maintain a steady pace driven by the knowledge of what follows behind. For the first hour, nothing unusual occurs. The forest around us is quiet, but not unnaturally so. Occasionally, we hear birds calling, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. It's almost possible to believe that our experiences of the previous night were hallucinations, products of fear and darkness. Then Lachlan, who has taken the lead, stops abruptly. "Tracks," he says, pointing to the ground before him. I move up beside him to look. The familiar deer-like prints cross our path, heading roughly in the same direction we're traveling. They're fresh, the disturbed earth still damp where it's been exposed. "It's following us," I say, stating the obvious. "No," Kai corrects, studying the tracks closely. "It's leading us. These were made deliberately, left for us to find." "A trap?" Lachlan suggests. "Maybe," Kai admits. "Or maybe it's just toying with us still, letting us know it's there, watching." "Should we change course?" I ask, scanning the surrounding forest nervously. Kai considers, then shakes his head. "No, Thunder Mountain is still our best option. We just need to be more careful." We proceed with heightened caution, keeping closer together and maintaining constant vigilance. The silver pendant feels warm against my skin now, though whether from my body heat or some other property I can't tell. My hand strays often to my pack where Blackwood's knife is secured. The afternoon wears on, and we make slower progress than hoped. Twice more we encounter the creature's tracks, always ahead of us, always pointing the way we're already going. It's unnerving, this sense of being herded, but we press on, lacking better alternatives. Around mid-afternoon, we reach a small stream that cuts across our path. The water is clear and cold, running swiftly over a rocky bed. According to Blackwood's journal, water, especially running water, confuses the creature's ability to track us. "We should follow this for a while," I suggest. "Try to break our trail." Kai nods agreement. "Good idea. If we wade upstream for a half-mile or so, it might give us some advantage." The water is frigid, numbing our feet through our boots, but we persevere, carefully picking our way over slippery stones. After about 20 minutes of this difficult progress, we exit the stream on the far bank and continue toward Thunder Mountain, which looms closer now. The terrain becomes steeper as we begin the ascent of the mountain's lower slopes. The forest thins somewhat, giving way to rocky outcroppings and meadows of alpine flowers. Under different circumstances, it would be beautiful. Now the increased visibility is both blessing and curse, easier to see our way, but also easier to be seen. "We should reach the first ridge by dusk," Kai says, pointing to a plateau visible about a mile ahead. "There's supposed to be an old fire lookout tower there, not manned anymore, but it might offer shelter for the night." The prospect of a secure structure is heartening. We increase our pace despite growing fatigue, determined to reach the plateau before nightfall. The sun is already dipping toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the mountainside. We're within sight of the plateau when we hear it, a sound that stops us in our tracks, a human voice calling for help. "Hello? Is someone there? Please, I need help." It's a woman's voice, high with distress, coming from a dense stand of pines to our left. Not the mimicry we heard the night before, but a voice filled with genuine fear and pain. "Hello?" the voice calls again. "Please, I'm hurt. I can't move." Lachlan looks at Kai and me, his expression conflicted. "That sounds real," he says quietly. "It's a trick," Kai insists. "It has to be. No one else would be out here." "But what if it's not?" Lachlan argues. "What if it's another hiker who ran into the same thing we did? We can't just leave them." I'm torn, wanting to believe it's just another of the creature's ploys, but unable to dismiss the possibility that someone genuinely needs our help. The voice calls again, weaker now, trailing off into what sounds like sobbing. "I'll check," I decide, retrieving Blackwood's knife from my pack. "You two stay here, keep watch. If I'm not back in 5 minutes, or if you hear anything strange, get to the plateau as fast as you can." "No way," Kai protests. "We stick together, remember? That's how it gets people, by separating them." 3 minutes then, I counter, just enough to look. I won't go out of sight. Before he can argue further, I move cautiously toward the stand of pines, knife gripped tightly in my hand. The silver pendant hangs heavy around my neck, a strange comfort as I approach the source of the cries. The pines form a small grove, their lower branches creating a canopy of shadow, despite the still present daylight. The voice has fallen silent, but I hear what might be labored breathing from within the gloom. "Hello?" I call softly. "Is someone there?" A rustling sound comes from the deepest shadows, followed by a weak voice. Different now, male rather than female. "Help me. Please." I freeze, every instinct screaming danger. The voice has changed, exactly as Kai warned about the Skinwalker's mimicry. I start to back away, turning to rejoin my friends. Then I see it, partially hidden behind a massive pine trunk, a figure slumped against the tree. Human, or at least human-shaped, dressed in tattered clothing. Blood darkens the front of what might once have been a flannel shirt. The face is obscured by matted hair, but I can see a hand raised weakly in my direction. "Please," the figure rasps, its voice changing again, becoming a blend of tones that no human throat could produce. "So, hungry?" Horror washes over me as the figure begins to change, its limbs elongating, its back arching unnaturally. The head rises, hair falling away to reveal not a human face but a deer's skull, empty eye sockets fixing on me with terrible awareness. I stumble backward, nearly dropping the knife in my haste to retreat. The creature rises, its transformation accelerating, human limbs twisting into something animal-like yet wrong, the chest expanding as ribs push against the tattered shirt. "Kai! Lachlan!" I scream, turning to run, but my way is blocked. Standing between me and escape is a second creature, identical to the first, the same deer skull head, the same wrongly proportioned body, and behind it, a third. My mind reels with the implications. Not one skinwalker, but many. Or perhaps, more terrifying still, one creature capable of creating multiple manifestations. I raise the knife, backing up until I feel the rough bark of a pine tree against my back. The creatures advance slowly, almost leisurely, secure in the knowledge that their prey is trapped. From beyond the grove, I hear Kai and Lachlan shouting my name. Then the sound of running footsteps approaching. The creatures pause, their skull heads swiveling toward the new sounds. "Here!" I yell. "In the pines! There's 3 of them!" The momentary distraction is all I need. I lunge forward, driving Blackwood's knife at the nearest creature. The blade connects with what should be its chest, sinking deep with surprising ease. A horrible screeching sound erupts from it as black ichor sprays from the wound. The creature staggers backward, the knife still embedded in its chest. For a moment, I think I've killed it. Then, with deliberate slowness, it reaches up and pulls the blade free, the wound closing almost immediately behind it. It tilts its skull head, regarding me with what I can only interpret as cruel amusement. Then it extends its arm, offering the knife back to me, handle first, a mocking gesture that says more clearly than words, "Your weapons cannot harm me." Kai and Lachlan burst into the grove, stopping short at the sight of the 3 creatures. One still holds Blackwood's knife, while the other 2 have begun to circle around, cutting off our escape routes. "The journal was wrong," I say, my voice strangled with fear. "The knife doesn't work." "No," Kai says, his eyes fixed on the creatures. "Blackwood said it had to be in its transitional state, neither fully human nor fully beast. These have already completed their transformation." "So what do we do?" Lachlan demands. "Run!" Kai shouts, grabbing my arm. "Now!" We break in the direction of the plateau, the only gap in the creature's encirclement. Behind us, I hear them give chase, swift, silent pursuit that gains on us with terrible speed. The trees thin as we approach the edge of the pine grove. The plateau, tantalizingly close. Lachlan, despite his injured ankle, takes the lead, his long legs carrying him faster than Kai or me. He breaks free of the trees first, sprinting across open ground toward the fire tower visible on the plateau's edge. I follow, lungs burning, legs pumping. Behind me, I hear Kai cry out in pain. I turn to see him sprawled on the ground, one of the creatures looming over him, its clawed hand reaching for his throat. Without thinking, I change direction, charging back toward them. The creature looks up at my approach, momentarily distracted from its prey. It's enough time for Kai to scramble backward, regaining his feet just as I reach them. "Go!" I yell, pushing him toward the plateau. "I'll hold it off." "No," he protests. "Together." The creature lunges, faster than seems possible. I dodge barely in time, feeling claws tear through my jacket sleeve. Kai grabs a fallen branch, swinging it like a club to force the creature back. The water, he gasps, pointing. To our right, the stream we followed earlier curves around the base of the plateau. Remember Blackwood's journal? Understanding flashes between us. Together we sprint for the water, the creature in close pursuit. Two more appear from the trees, converging on our position from different angles. They're toying with us, I realize. They could have taken us at any time, but they're drawing out the chase, feeding on our fear. We reach the stream and plunge in, the cold water shocking after our exertion. The creatures stop at the water's edge, pacing back and forth with obvious agitation. One tests the water with a cloven hoof, then pulls back sharply, as if pained. It works, I gasp. They can't cross. Not for long, Kai warns. Blackwood said it only confuses them temporarily. We need to reach the tower. We wade upstream, keeping to the deepest part of the channel. The creatures follow along the bank, their skull heads never turning away from us. Lachlan appears at the top of the plateau, waving frantically for us to hurry. After what seems like an eternity, we reach a point where the stream cuts into the base of the plateau. A steep path leads upward, switching back and forth to the top. We scramble out of the water and begin the ascent, slipping on the wet stones in our haste. The creatures remain at the water's edge, watching. Then, with a synchronicity that chills my blood, they turn and melt into the forest, disappearing from view. Where did they go? I pant, pausing halfway up the path. I don't know, Kai replies grimly. But we need to reach the tower before dark. We continue upward, reaching the plateau just as the sun touches the western horizon. Lachlan meets us at the top, his face pale with fear. What were those things? He demands. I thought you said there was one Skinwalker. I don't know, Kai admits. Maybe they're aspects of the same entity. Or maybe what's been hunting us is something else entirely. The fire lookout tower stands about 100 yards ahead, a square structure atop stilts, with a cabin-like building on top and a ladder leading up to it. It's old but appears intact, its metal components rusted but solid. We need to get inside before nightfall, I say, eyeing the rapidly darkening sky. Whatever those things are, they seem stronger after dark. We approach the tower cautiously, alert for any sign of the creatures. The area around the base is clear, with stone and gravel rather than vegetation, a fire break to protect the tower. The ladder leading up to the cabin is metal, its rungs worn but sturdy. Lachlan goes first, testing each rung before putting his full weight on it. Kai follows, with me bringing up the rear, constantly scanning our surroundings for any sign of threat. The cabin at the top is locked, but the hasp is old and gives way easily when Lachlan applies force. Inside, we find a single room with windows on all four sides, offering a 360-degree view of the surrounding wilderness. Basic furniture remains, a desk, a chair, a narrow cot, and most promising, a radio set bolted to the desk. Do you think it still works? I ask, hurrying to examine it. Kai shakes his head after a brief inspection. Power's long gone. And even if we could get it working, I doubt it has the range to reach anywhere helpful. I slump in disappointment. The tower offers temporary safety but no real solution to our predicament. We're still miles from any road or settlement, still being hunted by creatures that seem nearly impossible to fight. We'll rest here tonight, Kai decides. In the morning we can try to reach the ranger station on the other side of the mountain. It should be about 3 miles from here. Lachlan secures the trapdoor through which we entered, placing the heavy desk over it for good measure. I check the windows, making sure each one is closed and latched, though the glass in 2 of them is cracked. As darkness falls completely, we settle in for another night of vigilance. The small space is cold but far more secure than our previous camps. We share what remains of our food, the preserved meat from the cabin, and some energy bars that survived in our packs. What do we do if those things come back? Lachlan asks, voicing the fear we all share. They can't climb the ladder, Kai says with more certainty than I think he feels, and the tower's steel frame is too smooth for them to scale. We should be safe here. I want to believe him, but after what we've seen, it's difficult to have faith in any safety measures. I take out Blackwood's journal, flipping through its pages again in search of any information we might have missed. Most of it we've already read, but near the end, in what appears to be a hastily added footnote, I find something new. The elder warned that the Niatu is strongest when it has separated its prey from hope. maintain belief in salvation, in escape. Its power diminishes when faced with unwavering spirit. To defeat it requires not just weapons, but will. I share this with the others. So what? We just have to believe really hard that we'll survive? Lachlan says skeptically. Maybe it's more than that, Kai suggests. Many Native American beliefs hold that intention, and spiritual strength are as real as physical force. If this creature feeds on fear and despair, then courage and hope might be poison to it. Worth a try, I concede. Not like we have many other options. As the night deepens, we take turns keeping watch at the windows, scanning the darkened plateau below for any sign of movement. For hours, nothing stirs. The silence is almost worse than any sound might be. A waiting tension that stretches nerves to breaking point. Then, around what I estimate to be midnight, Kai, who has the watch, stiffens. There, he whispers, pointing toward the edge of the plateau where we ascended hours earlier. I join him at the window, squinting into the darkness. At first, I see nothing. Then movement catches my eye. Shapes emerging from the tree line below. Not 3 this time, but 5 or 6, their antlered silhouettes unmistakable in the moonlight. They approach the base of the tower with that same unnerving synchronicity, moving as if parts of a single organism rather than separate entities. They circle it once, twice, then stop, their skull heads tilting upward to look directly at our windows. Can they climb? Lachlan asks, his voice barely audible. I don't think so, Kai replies, but doubt edges his words. As if in answer to his uncertainty, one of the creatures approaches the ladder. It places a cloven hoof on the bottom rung, then pulls back as if burned. The metal, it seems, repels it somehow. Perhaps the steel itself, or more likely the traces of silver in the alloy. A strange sound rises from the assembled creatures, not quite a howl, not quite a scream, but something in between. It sets my teeth on edge and sends a shiver down my spine. The creatures begin to circle the tower again, moving faster now, their movements taking on a ritualistic quality. What are they doing? I whisper. I don't know, Kai admits, but I don't think we should watch too closely. There's wisdom in his warning. Looking at the creatures for too long produces a strange vertigo, as if the boundaries between them and the darkness, between their forms and the night itself, are somehow fluid. We retreat from the windows, huddling in the center of the small cabin. The creatures continue their circling below, their strange cries rising and falling like some terrible tide. They can't get in, Kai says firmly, as much to reassure himself as us. We just need to wait until dawn. But as the hours pass, the creatures' behavior becomes more aggressive. They begin to slam themselves against the tower's support structure, causing the entire cabin to shudder. The metal groans but holds firm. They throw rocks and branches, some striking the windows with enough force to further crack the already damaged glass. Can we fight them? Lachlan asks desperately. Isn't there anything in that journal about how to kill them? I consult Blackwood's writings again, searching for anything we might have missed. Nothing certain, I admit. Just what we already know. Silver or obsidian when they're changing form, not after. And even that's not guaranteed. A particularly violent impact rocks the tower, and one of the cracked windows shatters completely, sending glass shards skittering across the floor. Cold air rushes in, carrying with it the scent of decay that seems to accompany the creatures. Kai rushes to the opening, using his jacket to block it as best he can. We need something to cover this, he says urgently. I look around the small space and spot a metal first aid kit mounted on the wall. Pulling it down, I find it empty of supplies but intact. Its lid, when removed, is just large enough to cover most of the broken window. We secure it in place with duct tape from Lachlan's pack, creating a makeshift barrier. It won't stop determined entry, but it might slow it down. The assault on the tower continues through the night, with periods of intense activity followed by eerie silence. During one of these lulls, I hear something that makes my blood run cold. Voices, human voices, calling our names. Kai, help me. It's a woman's voice, familiar somehow. Son, please, they're hurting me. Kai's face goes ashen. That's my mother's voice, he whispers. But she's alive back in Vancouver. It can't be her. They're trying to lure us out, I say, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. Don't listen to it. The voices continue, changing to mimic people I know. My sister, my best friend from home, then Lachlan's parents, calling for him in panic-stricken Australian accents. It's not real, Lachlan mutters, hands pressed over his ears. It's not real. But the psychological toll is evident. Each of us is being targeted with the voices of those we love most, those we would instinctively rush to protect. The creatures are attacking not just our physical shelter, but our mental defenses as well. Through it all, I clutch the silver pendant Kai gave me, drawing strange comfort from its cool weight. Blackwood's knife lies on the desk before us, a reminder of failed hopes but also of human ingenuity and resistance. As the eastern sky begins to lighten with the first hint of dawn, the assault gradually subsides. The creatures withdraw to the edge of the plateau, their forms becoming indistinct in the growing light. By the time the sun crests the horizon, they have vanished completely, melting back into the forest below. We collapse in exhaustion, the night's terror giving way to a bone-deep weariness. But we can't afford to rest long. The creatures will return with nightfall, and we need to be well away from here by then. 3 miles to the ranger station, Kai reminds us, rousing himself with visible effort. If we leave now, we can make it by midday. And if the creatures are waiting for us? Lachlan asks. They seem weaker in daylight, I point out, and we know water confuses them. There's a larger stream on the other side of the mountain that we can follow. We gather our remaining supplies, including Blackwood's knife and journal. Before descending the ladder, we scan the plateau carefully, looking for any sign of the creatures. The area appears deserted, with only our own tracks visible in the dew-dampened grass. Cautiously, we climb down, weapons ready. I have Blackwood's knife, Kai his hunting knife, and Lachlan a makeshift spear fashioned from a broken chair leg with a sharpened end. We're painfully aware of how inadequate these would be against what we faced last night, but having them provide some psychological comfort at least. The morning is clear and cool, the sky a perfect blue that seems to mock the horrors of the night before. We set off across the plateau, heading for the trail that should lead to the ranger station on the mountain's far side. Our pace is brisk, despite our exhaustion, spurred by the desire to reach safety before the creatures return. The path leads through a series of alpine meadows, bright with wildflowers that wave gently in the morning breeze. Under different circumstances, it would be idyllic. Now the open space leaves us feeling exposed, vulnerable. Keep your eyes open, Kai warns unnecessarily. Just because we haven't seen them doesn't mean they're not watching. We reach the far side of the plateau without incident and begin the descent toward the valley beyond. The trail here is steeper, requiring careful footing on loose shale and exposed roots. Lachlan, with his injured ankle, struggles the most, but determination keeps him moving. About halfway down, we encounter the stream Kai mentioned, larger than the one we followed yesterday, its clear water rushing over a rocky bed. We pause to fill our water bottles and cool our faces in the refreshing flow. If we follow this downstream, Kai says, studying the terrain, it should lead us directly to the ranger station. It's built near where this feeds into a larger river. The decision made, we continue our journey along the stream bank. The going is easier here, the water having carved a relatively level path through the mountainside. Trees provide welcome shade as the day warms, and the constant sound of rushing water masks our own noise, giving a sense of security that may be false but is comforting nonetheless. After about an hour of steady progress, the forest begins to thin, and ahead we can see what appears to be a clearing. Kai, who has taken the lead, holds up a hand for us to stop. That should be it, he says, pointing through the trees. The ranger station is just beyond that clearing. Relief washes over me like a physical force. We've made it. Against all odds, we've survived the nightmare of Manitou Lake and its terrible guardians. A few hundred more yards, and we'll be able to call for help, to escape this wilderness that has nearly claimed us. We move forward eagerly, the prospect of safety lending new energy to our tired bodies. The clearing comes into view, a wide grassy area surrounding a small, official-looking building with a radio antenna on its roof. A dirt road leads away from it, disappearing into the trees in the direction that must eventually reach civilization. Thank God, Lachlan breathes. I was starting to think we'd never make it. We step into the clearing, moving quickly toward the station, but as we draw closer, I notice something that dampens my rising spirits. The building looks abandoned. The windows are dark, the door closed. There's no vehicle parked outside, no sign of human presence. Is it manned? I ask Kai. It should be, at least during fire season, he replies, his own concern evident. And that's now. We approach cautiously. The station is small but solid, a single-story structure built to withstand harsh mountain weather. The door is locked, but a sign indicates that rangers patrol the area daily during summer months. Someone should be back today, Kai says, reading the notice. We can wait. If not, we can follow the road, Lachlan points out. It has to lead somewhere. I peer through one of the windows, cupping my hands against the glass to block the glare. The interior is neat and orderly, a desk with a radio setup, filing cabinets, a small kitchen area, and what appears to be a bunk room through a doorway at the back. But no sign of recent occupation. Let's check around the perimeter, I suggest. Maybe there's an emergency entrance, or at least a way to use the radio. We circle the building, examining every potential entry point. At the back, we find what we're looking for, a small window that's been left partially open, presumably for ventilation. I can fit through that, Lachlan offers. He's the tallest and slimmest of our group. With our help, he hoists himself up and wriggles through the narrow opening. A moment later, we hear the front door being unlocked from inside. Lachlan appears, grinning triumphantly. Welcome to civilization, he says, gesturing us in with a flourish. The interior is as I glimpse through the window. Simple but well-equipped. Most importantly, there's a radio setup that appears operational. Kai immediately moves to it, examining the controls. It's on, he says with evident relief. And it looks like it has power. He picks up the handset and adjusts the frequency to what's labeled as the emergency channel. This is Kai Nakamura, calling from Thunder Mountain Ranger Station. Does anyone copy? Over. Static fills the room, then a voice responds, crackly but intelligible. This is Forest Service Dispatch. We read you. What's your situation? Over. Kai explains our predicament briefly. Lost hikers in need of evacuation. He doesn't mention the creatures. That would only complicate things and might lead the rescue team to dismiss us as delusional or pranksters. Understood, the dispatcher replies. We can have a team to your location in approximately 3 hours. Can you remain at the station until then? Over. Affirmative, Kai responds. We'll stay put, thank you. Over and out. He replaces the handset, turning to us with the first genuine smile I've seen in days. 3 hours. We just need to hold out 3 more hours. I check my watch. Just past noon. That means help should arrive around 3 p.m., well before sunset. We should be safe. Lachlan has already located the station's supplies, pulling out energy bars and bottled water. Might as well make ourselves comfortable, he says, distributing the food. We settle in to wait, the relief of imminent rescue allowing the full weight of our exhaustion to surface. Lachlan stretches out on one of the bunks, asleep almost instantly. Kai sits by the radio, as if afraid to move too far from our lifeline to safety. I find myself drawn to the windows, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. The creatures seem to prefer darkness, but after all we've witnessed, I'm taking nothing for granted. Do you think they'll follow us here? I ask Kai quietly. He considers the question, his face serious. I don't know. They've been hurting us all along, driving us away from the lake. Maybe this is what they wanted, to force us out of their territory. Or maybe they're just biding their time, I suggest grimly, waiting for nightfall. Kai nods, acknowledging the possibility. Either way, help will be here in a few hours. Even if they do come, we just need to hold out until then. I want to believe him, to believe that our ordeal is nearly over. But as I stare out at the peaceful clearing, I can't shake the feeling that it's not over, that the creatures of Manitou Lake aren't finished with us yet. The silver pendant feels heavy against my chest, a reminder of all we've learned and experienced. I take out Blackwood's journal, turning to the final entries, searching for any insight that might help us in the hours ahead. The last page contains what appears to be a hastily scrawled warning, the handwriting barely legible. They cannot be escaped, only confronted. The Niatu will follow those who have seen it until either they or it are destroyed. To flee is to delay the inevitable. Only by standing ground, by facing the fear it feeds upon, can one hope to survive. I close the journal, a cold certainty settling in my stomach. The creatures will come. And when they do, we'll need to make a stand. Not just to survive the night, but to end this once and for all. 3 hours. We have 3 hours to prepare for the final confrontation with the shadows of Manitou Lake. Time passes with excruciating slowness as we wait for rescue. Lachlan continues to sleep, his body demanding recovery after our ordeal. Kai alternates between monitoring the radio and checking our supplies. I remain by the window, watching the clearing and the forest beyond with growing unease. The day is bright and clear, sunshine streaming through the trees in dappled patterns that dance across the ground. Birds sing in the branches, and occasionally a squirrel or chipmunk darts across the open space. It all seems so normal, so peaceful, a stark contrast to the nightmare we've been living. But I can't shake the sense of wrongness that has settled over me. It's too quiet, too perfect. Like the stillness before a storm. I check my watch, 1:30 p.m. Still an hour and a half until help should arrive. I turn from the window, deciding to make myself useful by taking inventory of the ranger station's resources. The small kitchen area holds basic supplies, canned goods, pasta, energy bars, and bottled water. A first aid kit hangs on the wall, far more comprehensive than the typical hiker's version. In a closet, I find emergency equipment, flashlights, batteries, flares, a weather radio, and most promising, a shotgun in a locked case. Kai, I call, pointing to the weapon. Think we can get that open? He examines the lock. Maybe, but do you know how to use a shotgun? I've gone shooting with my uncle a few times, I admit. I'm not an expert, but I know the basics. It might not help against whatever those things are, he cautions. But I suppose it can't hurt to try. The case requires a key we don't have, but Kai manages to pick the lock with surprising skill using a paperclip from the desk. Inside, we find a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun and a box of shells. Better than nothing, I say, checking that the weapon is unloaded before examining it further. It appears well maintained, probably kept here for rangers to deal with aggressive wildlife. Let's hope we don't need it, Kai says, though his expression suggests he shares my doubts. We continue our preparation, gathering anything that might serve as a weapon or barrier. The silver pendant and obsidian stones Kai distributed earlier might be our best defense, based on what we've learned, but conventional weapons provide a psychological comfort, if nothing else. At 2 p.m., I note a subtle change in the atmosphere. The birdsong that has provided background noise all afternoon suddenly ceases. The quality of the light seems to shift, though the sun still shines brightly. A heaviness settles over the clearing, a pressure like the air before a thunderstorm. Something's wrong, I say, returning to the window. Look. Kai joins me, peering out at the apparently empty clearing. At first, he seems confused. I don't see anything. Exactly, I point out. No birds, no animals. Listen. He falls silent, and the complete absence of sound becomes apparent. No wind rustles the leaves, no insects buzz, no distant stream babbles. The world outside has gone utterly still. They're coming, Kai says, his voice barely above a whisper. They shouldn't be active in daylight, but somehow. Wake Lachlan, I instruct, moving to load the shotgun with hands that shake slightly. We need to be ready. As Kai rouses our sleeping companion, I scan the tree line again. This time I catch movement, a shadow detaching itself from the deeper shadows beneath the pines, then another, and another. They're here, I call. At least 3 of them, maybe more. Lachlan joins us at the window, sleep cleared instantly from his face at the urgency in my voice. I thought they couldn't come out in daylight, he says. Apparently they can, Kai replies grimly. They're just stronger at night. The creatures emerge fully from the forest, moving with that disturbing synchronicity we've come to dread. In the clear light of day, their wrongness is even more apparent. The deer skull heads mounted on bodies that seem to constantly shift between human and animal proportions, limbs elongating and contracting with each movement. 5 of them, Lachlan counts. More than before. They're not attacking, I note, watching as the creatures form a loose semicircle at the edge of the clearing, facing the station. They're just waiting. For what? Lachlan asks. Sunset, maybe, Kai suggests, or for us to make a mistake. I check my watch again. 2:15 p.m. Less than an hour until help should arrive. We just need to hold out a little longer, I say, trying to inject confidence into my voice. The rescue team will be here soon. And what happens when they show up? Lachlan demands. Those things will attack them too. We're leading more people into a death trap. He's right, I realize with a sinking heart. We can't just wait for rescue, not with those creatures positioned to ambush anyone who approaches. We need to warn the team, at minimum. Kai returns to the radio, adjusting the frequency to reach the dispatcher again. Thunder Mountain Ranger Station to Forest Service dispatch. Emergency update needed. Over. Static crackles. Then the same voice as before responds. This is dispatch. Go ahead, Thunder Mountain. Over. We have a situation, Kai says carefully. There are predators surrounding the station, possibly dangerous to the rescue team. Can you advise them to approach with extreme caution? Over. A pause, then. What kind of predators? Bears? Cougars? Over. Kai hesitates, looking to us for guidance. How do we explain what we're facing without sounding completely insane? Unknown species, he finally says. Multiple large creatures, extremely aggressive. We're barricaded inside the station for now, but any approaching personnel should be armed and alert. Over. Another pause, longer this time. I can imagine the dispatcher's skepticism. Understood, Thunder Mountain. I'll relay the warning. Rescue Team ETA remains approximately 45 minutes. Stay inside and maintain radio contact. Over. Roger that. We'll continue to monitor the situation. Thunder Mountain out. Kai replaces the handset, his expression troubled. They think we're seeing bears or something. Better than nothing, I say. At least they're warned that something's out there. We return to the window. The creatures haven't moved, maintaining their semicircle at the forest's edge. Their stillness is unnerving. No shifting of weight, no turning of heads, just an absolute predatory focus on the station. What are they waiting for? Lachlan wonders aloud. As if in answer, one of the creatures takes a single step forward, then another. Slowly, with deliberate grace, it begins to cross the clearing toward the station. The others remain in place, watching. It's testing us, Kai says, seeing if we'll run or fight. I raise the shotgun, aiming through the window at the approaching figure. Should I take the shot? Kai hesitates. It might not do any good. Blackwood's knife didn't hurt them. It's worth a try, Lachlan argues. What have we got to lose? The creature continues its approach, now halfway across the clearing. Its movement is smooth, almost liquid, its form seeming to blur at the edges in a way that makes my eyes hurt to focus on. I'm taking the shot, I decide, steadying the shotgun against the windowsill. I aim for the center mass, where a heart would be in a normal creature, and squeeze the trigger. The shotgun's report is deafening in the confined space of the station. Outside, buckshot tears into the advancing creature, causing it to stagger momentarily. Black ichor sprays from multiple impact points in its chest and abdomen. For a moment, I think the shot has been effective. Then, with that same deliberate slowness, the creature straightens. The wounds close before our eyes, the ichor seeming to flow back into its body. It resumes its advance, as if nothing had happened. Try again, Lachlan urges, his voice tight with fear. I pump the shotgun, chambering another round, and fire again. This time I aim for the skull head, hoping to destroy what might be the creature's brain. The shot connects, chipping away fragments of bone from the deer skull. The creature pauses, reaching up with one elongated hand to touch the damaged skull. Then it continues forward, now only 20 yards from the station. Behind it, the other creatures begin to advance as well, spreading out to approach from different angles. This isn't working, I say, lowering the shotgun. We need another plan. Kai has been flipping frantically through Blackwood's journal. Listen to this, he says, finding a passage near the middle. The elder insisted that the Niatu could be forced back to their own realm through a ritual of cleansing and banishment. Sacred herbs burned at the cardinal points, obsidian placed at each corner of the protected space, silver to bind the spell. A ritual? Lachlan repeats incredulously. That's your plan? Do you have a better one? Kai challenges. The shotgun isn't working. The knife didn't work. What else can we try? Lachlan falls silent, acknowledging the point. I check my watch, 2:30 p.m. Still at least half an hour until help arrives and the creatures are closing in. What do we need for this ritual? I ask Kai. We have the herbs, sage and cedar, he says, pulling the pouches from his pocket. We have the obsidian stones and your silver pendant. The journal mentions the cardinal points, north, south, east, west. We need to place the obsidian at those points around the station, burn the herbs, and... He hesitates. One of us has to recite the binding words. What binding words? Lachlan demands. Kai points to a passage in the journal written in a language I don't recognize. It's Kootenai, I think. My grandmother taught me some when I was young. I might be able to pronounce it correctly enough. It's a desperate plan, based on writings from a century-old journal and beliefs that most modern people would dismiss as superstition. But faced with creatures that shouldn't exist, hunting us with impossible abilities, I'm willing to try anything. Let's do it, I decide. What's first? Kai divides the herbs and obsidian stones between us. We need to place these at the 4 cardinal points around the station. That means going outside. The creatures are closer now, the lead one only about 15 yards from the front door. The others have spread out, approaching from different directions. We'll have to be fast, I say, checking the shotgun again. I'll go first, try to distract them. You two place the stones and herbs, then get back inside. Too dangerous, Kai objects. We should stick together. We don't have time to argue, I insist. This is our best chance. Before they can protest further, I move to the door, shotgun raised. Be ready, I tell them. When I start firing, go out the back way and circle around. Place the stones as quickly as you can. They nod reluctantly, positioning themselves by the rear door. I take a deep breath, steadying my nerves, then pull open the front door and step onto the small porch. The lead creature stops its advance, skullhead tilting as if curious about my sudden appearance. The others pause as well, their attention fixing on me with predatory intensity. I raise the shotgun and fire at the nearest creature, aiming for its legs this time. The buckshot tears into its lower limbs, causing it to stumble. It doesn't stop the creature, but the momentary distraction is all we need. Now! I shout, pumping the shotgun and firing again at a different target. From my peripheral vision, I see Kai and Lachlan slip out the back door, each carrying their share of the ritual materials. I continue firing, moving down the porch steps to draw the creature's attention further from my friends. The creatures respond to my aggression, all 5 now focusing on me. They advance with increased speed, that fluid movement that's neither fully human nor animal. I back away, maintaining distance while continuing to fire. Each shot slows them momentarily but does no lasting damage. Through gaps between the approaching creatures, I glimpse Kai placing an obsidian stone at what must be the eastern corner of the station's perimeter, quickly lighting the herbs with his lighter. Lachlan is doing the same at the southern point. They're moving swiftly, understanding the urgency. My shotgun clicks empty after the 6th shot. I have no time to reload, the lead creature is too close. I reverse my grip, using the weapon as a club, and swing it hard at the skull head. The impact produces a dull crack, and fragments of bone scatter. The creature recoils, giving me a precious moment to retreat a few more steps. Hurry, I call to my friends, who are now placing the 3rd set of stones and herbs at the western corner. The creatures seem to realize what we're attempting. 2 break off from pursuing me and turn toward Kai and Lachlan. I drop the shotgun and draw Blackwood's knife from my belt, rushing toward the nearest creature with a yell designed to recapture their attention. The silver blade slices into the back of the creature as it moves toward my friends. Unlike before, the wound doesn't immediately close. A thin line of black ichor continues to seep from the cut. The creature whirls to face me, emitting that terrible screech we heard at the tower. The knife works now, I shout, backing away as the creature advances on me. Something's different. Kai and Lachlan have reached the northern corner, completing the ritual perimeter. Kai lights the final bundle of herbs, then holds up the wooden fetish figure. He begins to chant in what must be the Kootenai language, his voice gaining strength and confidence with each unfamiliar word. The effect is immediate and startling. The creatures freeze in their pursuit, skull heads swiveling toward Kai. A visible tremor passes through their forms, like ripples on water. The one I wounded with the knife seems to flicker, its outline becoming momentarily transparent before solidifying again. It's working, Lachlan cries, hope kindling in his voice for the first time in days. Kai continues the chant, the wooden figure held high. I notice the silver pendant around my neck has begun to warm against my skin, not uncomfortably, but noticeably. A faint glow emanates from it, visible even in the daylight. The creatures begin to retreat, moving backward toward the forest's edge. Their movements are jerky now, lacking the fluid grace they displayed before. One stumbles, falling to all fours in a position that looks painfully unnatural. I advance cautiously, the knife still gripped in my hand. The wounded creature hisses at my approach, but retreats rather than attacking. The black ichor from its wound leaves a trail on the ground, sizzling slightly where it touches the earth. Kai's chant reaches a crescendo, his voice ringing out across the clearing. At the four corners of the station, the burning herbs produce smoke that seems to defy the natural movement of air, forming a barrier that's not quite visible but somehow perceptible. The creatures reach the tree line and pause there, skull heads lowered as if in defeat. Then, with a synchronicity that remains disturbing despite their retreat, they turn and melt into the forest, disappearing from view. Silence falls over the clearing. The unnatural stillness that preceded their arrival has broken. I can hear birds resuming their calls in the distance. The gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. The pressure that weighed on the air has lifted. "Did we do it?" Lachlan asks cautiously. "Are they gone?" Kai lowers the wooden figure, his expression cautious. "I don't know. The ritual was supposed to force them back to their own realm, but you're not sure if you did it right." I finish for him. He nods. The pronunciation, the intent, it all matters in these things, according to my grandmother. And I'm not exactly a trained shaman. We stand at the edge of the clearing, alert for any sign of the creature's return. Minutes pass with no movement from the forest. "We should get back inside," I suggest finally. "Maintain the perimeter, just in case. Help should be here soon." We return to the ranger station, each of us looking over our shoulders repeatedly. Inside, Kai replaces the wooden fetish and remaining herbs in the pouch, keeping them close at hand. I check the shotgun, reloading it from the box of shells despite its apparent ineffectiveness against the creatures. "What time is it?" Lachlan asks. I check my watch. 2:50. The rescue team should be here in about 10 minutes if they're on schedule. "And if those things come back," he presses. "We do the ritual again," Kai says firmly. "It worked once, it should work again." I'm not entirely convinced, but I nod agreement. Having some plan, some means of fighting back, is better than feeling helpless in the face of the unknown. Lachlan moves to the radio, checking in with the dispatcher to confirm the rescue team's approach. The response is reassuring. They're on schedule, now just minutes away. At the window, I continue to watch the forest edge, the knife still gripped tightly in my hand. The wound I inflicted on the creature hadn't healed immediately like before. Something had changed, either the ritual's effect or perhaps the fact that all of us were fighting back rather than running. Blackwood's final journal entry comes back to me. They cannot be escaped, only confronted. Perhaps that was the key all along, not the silver or obsidian alone, but the act of standing ground, of facing fear directly rather than fleeing from it. A sound from the direction of the dirt road draws my attention, the rumble of engines approaching. Moments later, 2 Forest Service vehicles appear, rugged SUVs with official markings. 4 rangers emerge, equipped with rifles and radios. "The rescue team," I say, relief washing through me. We made it. We exit the station to meet them, explaining our situation as best we can without sounding completely insane. We describe getting lost after leaving the trail, spending nights in the wilderness, and encountering what we carefully refer to as aggressive wildlife that we couldn't identify. The rangers are professional and efficient, more concerned with our physical well-being than the details of our ordeal. They perform quick medical checks, noting Lachlan's sprained ankle and our various cuts and bruises. One ranger radios for a medical evacuation for Lachlan, while the others prepare to escort Kai and me by vehicle. As we gather our remaining gear and prepare to leave, I find myself drawn to the edge of the clearing, looking back toward the forest where the creatures disappeared. Despite our apparent victory, I can't shake the feeling that it's not truly over, that the shadows of Manitou Lake will remain, waiting for the next unwary travelers to stumble into their domain. Kai joins me, following my gaze to the tree line. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asks quietly. "They're still out there." I nod. We forced them back, but I don't think we destroyed them. Maybe no one can, he suggests. Maybe they're as much a part of this wilderness as the trees and rocks. A ranger calls to us, indicating it's time to leave. With a final glance at the forest, we turn away, moving toward the vehicles and the promise of safety beyond. As I climb into the SUV, I touch the silver pendant still hanging around my neck. I'll keep it, I decide. A reminder of what we faced and survived. And perhaps, if the need ever arises, a weapon against the darkness that lurks in the remote places of the world. The rangers drive us away from Thunder Mountain, following the dirt road that eventually connects to a larger Forest Service road. With each mile that passes, the weight of our experience seems to lighten slightly. By the time we reach the nearest town 3 hours later, the horrors of Manitou Lake have begun to take on the quality of a nightmare, vivid but somewhat distant. But that night, in the safety of a motel room, I dream of deer skull heads and silent forests, of voices calling from the darkness and shapes that blur the boundary between human and animal. I wake in a cold sweat, the silver pendant clutched tightly in my hand. Some experiences mark you forever. Some fears embed themselves too deeply to ever fully fade. And some places, like Manitou Lake, should be left to their ancient guardians, undisturbed by human intrusion. The Skinwalkers, or Niatu, or whatever name best fits the creatures we encountered, will continue their eternal vigil. And I will carry the knowledge of their existence with me always. A burden, yes, but also a strange gift. I have glimpsed beyond the veil of the ordinary world and survived to tell the tale, though I suspect few would believe it. 6 months have passed since our escape from Manitou Lake. Winter has settled over the land, blanketing the mountains in snow and ice. The wilderness we fled has transformed, its dangers hidden beneath pristine whiteness, dormant perhaps, but not gone. I've tried to resume my normal life. I go to work, see friends, engage in the mundane routines that once seemed so important. But something fundamental has changed within me. Having faced the impossible, the boundaries I once accepted as fixed have become fluid, uncertain. Lachlan returned to Australia after his ankle healed, eager to put as much distance as possible between himself and the American wilderness. We stay in touch through occasional text messages, but neither of us references what happened directly. Some experiences are too strange, too personal to be reduced to casual conversation. Kai has gone in the opposite direction. Our shared ordeal awakened something in him, a connection to his Kootenai heritage that had lain dormant for most of his life. He spent the past months researching Native American folklore, particularly stories of skinwalkers and similar entities across different tribal traditions. We talk frequently, comparing notes on his discoveries. They're known by different names, he told me during one late-night call, but the core elements remain consistent. Humans transformed into something other, existing in the boundary between our world and the spirit realm, always associated with isolated places, always hunting those who intrude on their territory. Have you found any accounts of people who successfully fought them off? I asked. A few, he admitted. Most involve rituals similar to what we attempted. Some mention silver or obsidian weapons. But the most important factor seems to be confronting them directly, facing the fear they generate, rather than succumbing to it. This aligned with my own interpretation of our experience. The creatures, whatever they truly were, fed on fear, isolation, despair. When we finally stood our ground together, something had changed in the dynamic between hunter and hunted. The silver pendant remains with me always, hanging around my neck beneath my clothes. I've had dreams, vivid, unsettling visions that feel more like memories or premonitions than ordinary nightmares. In them, I stand at the shore of Manitou Lake under a full moon, watching as shapes emerge from the dark water. They call to me, using voices I know, inviting me to join them beneath the surface. I always wake before I answer. Tonight marks exactly 6 months since our rescue from Thunder Mountain. Outside my apartment window, snow falls in thick, silent flakes, accumulating on the sill. I sit at my desk, Blackwood's journal open before me. I've read it countless times, searching for insights we might have missed, clues to the true nature of what we encountered. My phone vibrates with an incoming call, Kai. I answer, somehow unsurprised by his timing. You feel it too, don't you? He asks without preamble. The connection is still there. Yes, I admit. I've been thinking about it all day. I found something, he continues. A reference in an old Kootenai text my grandmother had. It talks about the binding between those who've encountered the Niatu and the creatures themselves. It doesn't end with escape. It's a permanent link, like a thread connecting predator and prey across any distance. A chill runs through me, not entirely from fear. On some level, I've known this all along. What does that mean for us? It means they can find us, Kai says bluntly, and I think they're trying to. The dreams. You've been having them too, haven't you? Standing by the lake, the voice is calling. Yes. There's no point denying it. What do we do? Kai is silent for a moment. We have two choices, he finally says. We can try to sever the connection completely through a more powerful ritual, one that might permanently banish them from our realm of experience. Or, I prompt when he hesitates. Or we go back. We finish what we started. We find a way to destroy them. The suggestion should sound insane. Returning voluntarily to the place that nearly killed us, to face creatures that defied conventional understanding of what's possible. Yet something within me responds to the idea, a recognition that our story with Manitou Lake is indeed unfinished. When? I ask. The decision made in that single word. Spring, Kai says, when the mountain passes clear. We'll need to prepare properly this time, gather the right materials, study the rituals more carefully, and we'll need help. Lachlan won't come back, I point out. Not him. I've been in contact with someone from my grandmother's tribe, an elder who knows the old ways. He's willing to guide us, to teach us what we need to know. The prospect of returning to those dark woods should terrify me. Instead, I feel a strange clarity, as if a path that was always meant for me has finally revealed itself. I'll be ready, I promise. After we hang up, I return to Blackwood's journal, turning to the final page. Below his last written entry is something I discovered only weeks after our return, a crude map drawn in fading ink showing Manitou Lake and its surroundings. At the center of the lake, Blackwood had marked an X with a single word beside it, source. What that means, I'm not certain, but I suspect we'll discover its significance when we return. The creatures of Manitou Lake have not finished with us, nor we with them. The confrontation has merely been postponed. Outside, the snow continues to fall, muffling the sounds of the city. In that hushed stillness, I imagine I can hear whispers. Voices calling my name from a great distance, beckoning me back to the wilderness where reality itself grows thin. Spring will come, the mountains will thaw, and I will answer that call, armed with new knowledge and purpose. Whatever awaits us at Manitou Lake, be it salvation or destruction, at least the uncertainty will end. I close the journal and move to the window, watching the snow transform the familiar landscape into something alien and pristine. Somewhere far to the west, in a remote valley few have ever visited, a dark lake lies frozen beneath winter's grip. But beneath that ice, something stirs, patient and ancient, waiting for our return. I touch the silver pendant through my shirt, drawing comfort from its solid presence. We're coming, I whisper to the night. This time, we'll be ready. The snow swirls in response, forming patterns that seem almost deliberate before dissolving back into chaos. And somewhere in that brief configuration, I imagine I glimpse the outline of a skull-headed figure, watching me from across the miles. The final confrontation awaits when winter releases its hold on the mountains. Until then, I will prepare, gathering strength and knowledge for the reckoning to come. For the shadows of Manitou Lake are patient, and they have marked us as their own. I never thought I'd find peace in isolation. Most people avoid it, but I sought it out deliberately when I applied to be a ranger at Kachina Woods National Forest. The name comes from ancient Pueblo spirits, or so I was told during my orientation. Seemed fitting for a place that felt older than time itself. The decision to take this job came after 8 years of grinding away in corporate finance. My cubicle walls had been closing in, and each spreadsheet felt like another bar in an invisible prison. When my doctor said my blood pressure resembled someone twice my age, I knew something had to change. 3 months later, I was training as a seasonal ranger, and 6 months after that, I was offered a permanent position at one of the most remote outposts in the service. My station sits on the edge of Lake Nahimana, a glacial remnant that reflects the surrounding pines like a perfect mirror on calm days. The cabin itself is rustic but functional. 2 bedrooms, a common area with a fireplace, kitchen, bathroom, and an office space equipped with communications gear. Solar panels and a backup generator provide electricity, and satellite gives me limited internet and phone capabilities. When storms hit, though, I might as well be living in the 1800s. Most days I patrol designated areas, maintain trails, assist hikers, and document wildlife. The isolation doesn't bother me, but headquarters requires regular check-ins for safety. Twice weekly, I radio in status reports. If I miss 2 consecutive check-ins, they send someone to investigate. It's a system that works well enough, though, in winter when the road becomes impassable, airdrops supply me with necessities. My fellow rangers are scattered across various stations. Jasmine manages the visitor center 30 miles south. Born in Australia, she came to the States for college and never left. Her knowledge of fauna is unmatched, and her accent hasn't faded despite 15 years here. Then there's Marcus, a Canadian transplant who runs the northern station. He's been here longer than anyone, 23 years in the service. And Scott, who handles the eastern boundary, grew up on a reservation and knows tracking techniques passed down through generations. We meet monthly at headquarters for briefings and equipment maintenance, sharing stories and warnings. The forest changes with each season, presenting new challenges. In my 15 months here, I've rescued lost hikers, treated injuries, cataloged rare species, and survived blizzards that buried my cabin in 6 feet of snow. But tonight, as I write in my journal by firelight, I'm troubled by something new. 3 hikers reported missing last week were found yesterday, disoriented and suffering from exposure. That happens occasionally. People underestimate the wilderness. What bothers me is what they said when they were found. All 3, independently, described being followed by something large. They heard branches breaking, smelled a putrid odor, and felt watched. One claimed to have seen a massive shadow moving between trees at dusk. Headquarters attributed their stories to hallucinations from dehydration and fear. A reasonable explanation, yet similar reports have trickled in over the past month. Scott mentioned finding unusual tracks near the eastern ridge, too large for bear, with a stride length suggesting something that walks upright. He took photos but didn't share them widely, concerned about encouraging Bigfoot tourism. I thought little of it until now. The wind picks up outside, whistling through the pine branches. My radio crackles with static before Marcus's voice breaks through. Base to Nahimana Station. Come in. I grab the handset. Nahimana here. Go ahead, Marcus. Just checking in. Bad storm heading your way from the north. Expect heavy rain by morning. Any hikers in your sector? I check my logbook. None registered. Last group left yesterday afternoon. Good. I've been finding strange things up here. Trees broken about 8 feet up, not wind damage. Something's been moving through my sector heading south, toward you. A chill passes through me despite the fire's warmth. Wildlife migration? Maybe. His tone suggests otherwise. Just keep your eyes open and your doors locked. After we sign off, I double-check all windows and doors. As I secure the back entrance, I notice something that stops me cold. 20 yards from my cabin, at the forest edge, a pine tree has been recently damaged. A branch has been snapped clean off about 9 feet up, much higher than a bear could reach standing. I shut the door quickly, sliding the deadbolt into place. For the first time since arriving at Kachina Woods, I retrieve my service pistol from the safe and place it on my bedside table before turning in. That night I dream of being watched by eyes I cannot see. Morning broke with the promised storm. Rain lashed against my windows as I performed my daily radio check-in. All stations reported similar weather. Visibility reduced to mere yards, wind gusts strong enough to bring down weakened trees. A day for indoor work. I spent hours updating trail maps and incident reports, occasionally glancing out windows at the wall of gray. By mid-afternoon, the storm began to ease, leaving behind a forest dripping with moisture. The air smelled clean, earthy. I decided to check for storm damage along my closest trails. The forest floor had transformed into a tapestry of wet leaves and needles that dampened my footsteps. I noted several fallen branches to clear later and a washout on the eastern trail that would need attention. Otherwise, my sector had weathered the storm well. As I approached the junction leading back to my cabin, I froze. Something wasn't right. The sensation of being observed returned, stronger than before. I scanned the tree line methodically, seeing nothing unusual. Then I noticed the silence. No birds called, no squirrels chattered. The forest had gone completely still. I unholstered my sidearm and continued forward cautiously. Near the trail marker, I found what had spooked the wildlife. Pressed into the soft earth was a footprint unlike anything in our wildlife guides, nearly 16 inches long, humanoid in shape but with proportions all wrong. 5 toes splayed wide, pressing deeper at the heel than any human would. And beside it, another. I photographed the prints with my phone before the rapidly drying ground could distort them. A scientific part of my mind suggested a bear walking on hind legs, paws distorted by mud. But bears don't have 5 digits that match human toe patterns, just larger. Later that evening, I emailed the photos to Scott, whose tracking expertise I trusted. His reply came an hour later. Don't share these widely. Found similar tracks after the April floods. Whatever made these is heavy, over 500 pounds by pressure depth. Stride length suggests 7 to 8 feet tall. Keep your radio on. I read his message 3 times. Scott wasn't one for exaggeration or folklore. If he was concerned, I should be too. That night, I was awakened by a crash from my porch. I grabbed my flashlight and pistol, approaching the front door cautiously. Through the window, I could see my equipment locker had been knocked over, its contents scattered. Moving to different windows, I swept my light across the clearing but saw nothing. I almost convinced myself it had been knocked over by wind until morning revealed the truth. The metal locker hadn't merely fallen, it had been dented inward as if struck with tremendous force. My provisions, sealed packets of dried food, were gone. What disturbed me most were the muddy prints leading away from my cabin. The same enormous footprints, but now I could follow their path from the porch into the forest. They led toward Lake Nahimana, disappearing where the shore became rocky. I spent hours searching the circumference but found no exit prints. Either the creature had waded into the lake or had carefully used the rocks to mask its trail. When I returned to my cabin, my satellite phone showed a message from Jasmine. 3 more hikers reported something following them near your sector yesterday. Headquarters is sending researchers next week to investigate unusual wildlife activity. They're calling it possible bear behavior. We know better. Call me when you can. I tried reaching her, but storms had damaged reception towers. My calls wouldn't connect. I made detailed notes instead, documenting everything I'd observed. If researchers were coming, I wanted evidence ready. That afternoon, I heard wood knocking from across the lake. 3 distinct strikes, then silence. The pattern repeated several minutes later, seeming to come from a different location. Wilderness training teaches that predators sometimes circle before approaching. I retreated to my cabin, watching through windows as daylight faded. After sunset, I caught glimpses of movement at the forest edge, something large shifting between trees. My flashlight beam never found it directly, but twice I saw branches moving against the wind, about 9 feet above ground. Around midnight, something circled my cabin. Heavy footsteps crunched in the gravel, pausing occasionally. I heard deep, rumbling breaths outside my bedroom window, the breathing of something massive, something that smelled of wet fur and decay. When it pressed against the wall, I could feel the vibration through my mattress. For hours, it prowled around my shelter, testing windows, scratching at doors. The walls of my cabin suddenly seemed fragile against whatever waited outside. I clutched my radio, ready to call for help, knowing none could reach me before morning. Near dawn, the noises ceased. When sunlight finally broke, I found new prints circling my cabin, deeper than before, as if the creature had carried something heavy. In some areas, strange drag marks accompanied the footprints. My radio crackled to life with Marcus's voice, tense and rushed. All stations, be advised. Something attacked my cabin last night, broke through my storage shed. I'm relocating to headquarters temporarily. Has anyone else experienced? His transmission cut short. When I tried to reach him, only static answered. After Marcus's cut-off transmission, headquarters ordered all remote station rangers to check in every 6 hours. The Forest Service officially attributed recent incidents to aggressive bear activity, but in private communications, my fellow rangers expressed doubts. Scott sent an encrypted email detailing his own encounters: strange howls at night, trees found stripped of bark at impossible heights, and once glimpsing something massive moving through dawn mist. "Whatever this is," he wrote, "it's becoming bolder. Indigenous stories from this region speak of a creature called skookum, a giant that haunts remote forests. I dismissed those tales until now." 3 days passed with heightened vigilance. I carried my sidearm constantly and set up motion-activated cameras around my cabin. Each night brought strange sounds: wood knocks, rocks clacking together, and once, a wailing cry that raised the hair on my neck. Though my cameras captured nothing definitive, one pre-dawn image showed a blurred shape at the forest edge. Tall, broad-shouldered, but frustratingly indistinct. On the fourth morning, I woke to silence. My first thought was relief until I realized what was wrong. My solar-powered perimeter lights were off. Checking the equipment revealed the panels had been smashed, wires torn out. Something had deliberately disabled my security system. I radioed headquarters immediately. They promised to send a maintenance team, but weather conditions would delay them at least 2 days. In the meantime, I was instructed to maintain normal operations, but exercise caution. Normal operations included checking the Western Trail that day. I almost requested reassignment, but pride prevented it. Instead, I packed extra supplies, my GPS locator, and ensured my weapon was loaded. The forest felt different that morning. Watching, waiting. Mist clung to the ground, reducing visibility to 50 yards in places. I documented routine conditions: trail erosion, new growth, animal signs. Everything appeared normal until I reached Broken Ridge Overlook. The viewing platform had been damaged, handrails torn from support posts, wooden planks splintered. This wasn't weather damage or vandalism. The destruction showed immense strength, with some beams appearing twisted rather than broken. As I photographed the damage, I noticed a foul odor, like wet animal fur, mixed with decomposition. The smell grew stronger as I completed my documentation. Something watched from the forest behind me. I could feel its gaze boring into my back. Slowly I turned. Through gaps in the trees, approximately 70 yards away, stood what I can only describe as a nightmare made flesh. Massive, covered in dark reddish-brown fur. Standing upright at what must have been 8 feet tall. Its proportions were wrong. Arms too long, shoulders impossibly broad. Though partly obscured by foliage, its face appeared flat, framed by matted hair. Our eyes met across the distance. Neither of us moved. Its gaze held intelligence, calculating, measuring. This was no animal acting on instinct. It was making decisions. When it shifted slightly, muscles rippling beneath its fur, instinct took over. I backed away, keeping my eyes on the figure until reaching the main trail, then turned and moved quickly toward my cabin. I didn't run. Running triggers predatory chase responses, but maintained the fastest walk possible. Halfway back, I heard branches breaking behind me. Heavy footfalls, getting closer. My walk became a jog, then a sprint as self-preservation overrode training. I reached my cabin gasping for breath, locking the door behind me before rushing to windows to scan the forest edge. Nothing visible, but the feeling of being watched remained. I radioed headquarters with a coded message indicating a Class 1 wildlife encounter, the most serious classification. The response was immediate. Remain sheltered. Extraction team departing tomorrow at first light. Relieved, I began gathering essential equipment for evacuation. My relief vanished when I tried confirming details an hour later and found my radio dead, the satellite phone too. All communications cut. Outside, storm clouds gathered, unnaturally dark for early afternoon. By evening, rain pounded my roof while wind howled through the trees. The storm perfectly isolated me. No communications, impassable roads, and weather too dangerous for helicopter approach. I was completely alone with whatever circled my cabin. As darkness fell, the attacks began. First, rocks struck my roof and windows, testing, probing. Then powerful blows against my door, making the frame creak. Between thunderclaps, I heard multiple impacts around the cabin. Not random, but methodical, as if searching for structural weaknesses. I positioned myself in the central room, away from windows and doors, pistol ready. The rational part of my mind cataloged facts. Large bipedal creature, intelligent enough for coordinated stalking, strong enough to damage reinforced structures. The primal part simply registered threat and urged either fight or flight. Around midnight, the power failed. My generator kicked in but died minutes later, as if something had damaged it. Now, in darkness broken only by lightning flashes, I heard new sounds, scraping at my roof, wood splintering. The skylight creaked under immense pressure. I retreated to the bathroom, the only room without external walls or windows, and barricaded the door. Through the walls came sounds of destruction, glass breaking, wood splintering, metal tearing. The creatures plural, from the overlapping noises, were systematically dismantling my shelter. In lightning flashes through the small bathroom window, I caught glimpses of massive shapes moving around my cabin. 3 distinct figures, coordinating, communicating with guttural vocalizations unlike anything in my wildlife training. The bathroom door frame began to splinter under tremendous pressure. Whatever was out there had found me. The bathroom door held for precisely 27 seconds before the frame gave way. In that time, I'd positioned myself in the shower stall, pistol aimed at the entrance. When the door crashed inward, I expected to face the creatures directly. Instead, darkness filled the doorway. Complete, unnatural darkness that seemed to absorb the beam of my flashlight. From within this void came breathing, deep, rhythmic huffs from multiple sources. The stench of wet fur and decay washed over me in waves, so powerful I fought not to gag. A massive silhouette blocked the doorway, too large for the opening. It didn't enter but reached inside. An impossibly long arm ending in a hand with fingers that seemed both human and not. Curved nails like claws extended from fingertips. I fired twice. The gunshots were deafening in the confined space. The arm withdrew with a roar that vibrated through my bones, not in pain, but in rage. The darkness receded slightly, and I heard heavy movement throughout my cabin, communication and grunts and huffs between at least 3 distinct voices. Lightning illuminated the bathroom briefly, revealing my shattered sanctuary. The creatures had systematically destroyed everything: communications equipment, weapons locker, food supplies. This wasn't random destruction, they were eliminating resources, isolating me. Rain poured through the damaged roof as I considered my options. Remaining meant certain death when they decided to enter again. Fleeing offered slim hope. I knew these forests better than any creature, even one that called them home. Between thunderclaps, I heard the creatures moving to the front of the cabin. My chance had arrived. I slipped through the bathroom window, dropping to the muddy ground outside. The storm provided cover for my movement as I crept along the cabin wall to the tool shed. Inside, I quickly gathered what I needed: emergency flares, knife, first aid kit, water purification tablets, and a waterproof pack to carry them. Most importantly, I found the emergency locator beacon, satellite-based, with a separate battery system. I activated the beacon, then slipped into the forest, using trails only rangers knew. The creatures wouldn't expect me to head deeper into the wilderness, away from roads and safety. But I had a destination: the old fire watchtower on Sentinel Ridge, constructed of steel and concrete. If I could reach it by dawn, I'd have defensible shelter and visibility. The journey through storm-lashed forest tested every skill I'd developed. Twice I heard pursuit, breaking branches and guttural calls, but using creek beds and rocky outcroppings, I broke my trail. The creatures were hunters, but I was a guardian of these woods. I knew every hollow, every passage. Dawn found me climbing the metal stairs of the watchtower, exhausted but alive. From this height, I surveyed the forest, stretching in all directions. My cabin was a distant, damaged shape near the lake's edge. No movement was visible around it, but that meant nothing. These creatures had evaded detection for decades, perhaps centuries. Inside the watchtower, I barricaded the single entrance and took inventory of supplies left by maintenance crews: enough food and water for 3 days, emergency radio equipment, and basic medical supplies. I treated cuts obtained during my flight and tried the radio. To my surprise, it functioned. "This is Nahimana Station Ranger requesting emergency evacuation from Sentinel Watchtower. Code Black. Repeat, Code Black. Code Black. life-threatening situation requiring immediate response. After 3 attempts, headquarters acknowledged, "Copy Nahimana. Extraction impossible until storm system passes. Estimated time frame, 36 hours. Maintain position. Can you describe threat?" How to explain what I'd encountered without sounding delusional. Multiple aggressive wildlife specimens. Destruction of primary shelter. Coordinated hunting behavior. Copy. Secure location and conserve resources. Maintain hourly radio contact. The day passed with no sign of the creatures. I documented everything I'd witnessed in the tower's logbook, including detailed descriptions of the creatures, their behavior patterns, and the systematic way they'd disabled my equipment. Someone needed to know, even if I didn't survive. As sunset approached, movement caught my eye. 3 dark figures emerging from the tree line below, approaching the tower. They moved with frightening coordination, spreading out to surround the structure. Unlike at my cabin, here they made no attempt at concealment. In fading light, I finally saw them clearly. They stood between 7 and 9 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown fur, with massively muscled frames built for power and endurance. Their faces appeared almost human-like in structure, but with pronounced brow ridges and wide, flat noses. Eyes reflected amber in my flashlight beam, intelligent, calculating. The largest pointed toward the tower entrance, making gesture-like movements to the others. They were communicating, planning. One began climbing the metal framework with disturbing ease, testing the structure's integrity. I readied flares and my pistol, knowing neither would stop these creatures if they breached my shelter. The radio crackled with headquarters requesting status update, but I couldn't respond without revealing my position to the creatures below. As night fell completely, they began their assault. Metal groaned as they tested different points in the tower's framework. The smallest, still over 7 feet tall, began systematically removing bolts from the lower supports with dexterous fingers. They weren't just strong, they understood structures, weaknesses, how things were built. When the tower began to sway slightly, I knew they would bring it down by morning. My only hope lay in communication. These creatures showed intelligence, perhaps enough to understand intention. I took a calculated risk and opened the observation deck window. The creatures immediately focused on me, freezing in position. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my weapon on the ledge where they could see it, then stepped back with empty hands raised. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, the largest creature approached the tower base and released a series of varied vocalizations, not random noises, but patterns with distinct repetition. It was communicating. When it finished, it waited, head tilted slightly as if expecting response. I repeated the pattern back as closely as human vocal cords allowed. This caused immediate reaction, all 3 creatures withdrawing slightly, conferring among themselves with quick gestures and vocalizations. The night became a strange standoff. They didn't resume their destruction of the tower, but neither did they leave. They watched, communicated among themselves, occasionally producing objects from the forest to show each other, including pieces of my equipment from the cabin. Near dawn, a helicopter's distant thumping broke the silence. The creatures looked skyward, then at each other, before melting into the forest with surprising speed for being so large. Within moments, they had vanished completely. The research team that retrieved me documented the tower damage and my destroyed cabin. They collected hair samples, photographed footprints, and recorded my testimony. Their expressions showed skepticism until they analyzed the recordings I'd managed to make of the creature's vocalizations, complex, structured sounds that preliminary analysis suggested contained linguistic patterns. 2 weeks later, I sat in a classified debriefing with senior Forest Service officials and researchers from an unnamed government agency. They had questions, many questions, about vocalization patterns, about tool use, about coordinated tactics. What they revealed during that meeting changed everything I thought I knew about North American wilderness. Similar encounters had been documented for decades, carefully concealed from public knowledge. What I'd experienced wasn't unique, just one of the most direct confrontations ever recorded. "Why tell me this now?" I asked finally. The senior researcher leaned forward. "Because we're planning an extended study in Kachina Woods, and we need someone who's encountered them and survived. Someone they've already noticed." I should have refused. Should have resigned, moved to a city, surrounded myself with concrete and steel and electric lights. Instead, I found myself nodding, because something in those amber eyes had recognized me as more than prey, had communicated intention, had shown not just intelligence, but awareness. "When do we start?" I asked. The researcher smiled. "We already have. They're watching us right now. They always have been. Even now, as I write this from my new reinforced research station deep in Kachina Woods, I feel eyes upon me, watching, waiting, learning, just as I watch and wait and learn about them. In this ancient forest, we are not the apex predators. We never were. And somewhere in the darkness beyond my windows, they are coming to the same conclusion about us." My name is Joshua Moore, and what I'm about to share with you is the truth of what happened to me and my friends during our hiking expedition into the Great Smoky Mountains in the fall of 2019. For the past few years, I've carried this secret because I knew how it would sound. Unbelievable, impossible, the ramblings of someone who'd lost touch with reality. But I can't keep it locked inside anymore. I need to tell someone what really happened out there, in those ancient mountains where civilization feels like a distant memory. I was 28 years old at the time, working in marketing for a tech company that I hated. My friends, Derek, Marcus, and Tom, were in the same boat. We'd all known each other since college, and we bonded over our shared sense of being trapped in the modern world. Derek worked in finance. Marcus was an accountant. Tom was in sales. We weren't outdoor enthusiasts by any real measure. We didn't have extensive hiking experience, and we certainly weren't prepared for what we were about to encounter, though I didn't know that yet. The idea came up one night in late October when we were sitting in Derek's apartment, drinking cheap beer and complaining about our jobs. Derek suggested we take a week off and do something real, something that would break us out of the routine that had become our lives. He'd been watching documentaries about the Appalachian wilderness, about hikers who pushed themselves into remote areas, and he became obsessed with the idea of testing ourselves against nature. "We should do a real trek," he said, his eyes gleaming with that dangerous mixture of ambition and boredom that makes men do stupid things. "Not just some day hike. I mean real camping, 5 days minimum. Miles into the wilderness where you feel completely isolated." Marcus looked at me, and I could see my own skepticism reflected in his face. But Tom was already nodding, his enthusiasm building. "The Smoky Mountains," he said. "That's where you go if you want to feel small. I read about it somewhere. Thousands of miles of trails, some of them barely maintained." We spent the next month planning. Derek did research, creating detailed maps and itineraries. We bought gear, tents, sleeping bags, water filters, camping stoves, dehydrated food that tasted like cardboard. We trained by going on shorter hikes in the weekends, nothing too strenuous. Nothing that would have prepared us for what was coming. The night before we left, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother, about how I hadn't told her where I was going, not specifically. I'd just mentioned time off work, a getaway. In my bones, there was something that told me not to go, a subtle wrongness that I couldn't articulate. But I was tired of being predictable, of being safe. I was tired of my apartment and my job and my empty weekends scrolling through social media. I wanted to feel alive, to feel like I was part of something real. So I packed my backpack, loaded my truck, and drove to meet the others at our rendezvous point near the park entrance. We arrived at the Cades Cove area on November 2nd, a Friday afternoon. The weather was perfect in that way that autumn weather can be. Cool and crisp, the sky a brilliant blue, with only wisps of clouds. The mountains around us were still full of color, though the leaves were falling faster now, covering the ground in shades of amber, rust, and gold. It was beautiful in a way that made me feel both peaceful and uneasy. Derek had planned a route that would take us deep into the park, away from the main trails and the tourist areas. We would trek for 5 days, covering about 30 miles total, camping 3 nights in remote backcountry areas that required permits. Derek had obtained all the necessary paperwork weeks ago. Everything was official, everything was planned. "This is going to change our lives," Derek said as we stood there, looking at the mountains, adjusting the straps on our backpacks. He wasn't wrong, though not in the way he meant. We started our hike at around 2 in the afternoon. The trail we took was reasonably well maintained at first, winding through mixed forest, oak, hickory, hemlock. We passed several other hikers heading in the opposite direction, people who were finishing their day trips. They looked at our heavy packs with a mixture of respect and something else. Was it concern? I remember thinking it was odd, the way one older man looked at us, the way he seemed to pause as if to say something, then decided against it. By the time we reached our first camp spot around 6 o'clock, we were exhausted in a way that gym workouts had never prepared us for. Our legs ached, our backs screamed. The weight of the packs seemed to have multiplied since we'd started. But we were also exhilarated. We'd done it. We'd made it out here. We'd left the world of cars and offices and responsibilities behind. We set up camp in a small clearing near Abrams Creek, a spot that Derek's maps indicated was perfect for our first night. The creek ran clear and cold, and we could hear its constant murmur throughout the evening. Tom and Marcus collected firewood while Derek and I set up the tents. The work felt meditative in a way, each movement purposeful and necessary. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, we sat around our campfire, eating rehydrated chili and drinking hot coffee. The darkness came on quickly, as it does in the mountains. Within minutes of the sun disappearing below the ridgeline, it was night. Not the kind of night you get in the city, where streetlights and buildings keep the darkness at bay. This was a darkness that felt complete, that seemed to swallow the edges of our small circle of firelight. "It's so quiet," Marcus said, and his voice sounded small and uncertain. He was right. Without the background noise of civilization, the absence of sound was almost overwhelming. All we could hear was the fire crackling, the creek running, and occasionally the wind moving through the trees above us. "That's the point," Derek said. "This is what real silence sounds like." But it wasn't silent, I realized. Not really. There were sounds, but they were the sounds of the forest at night, sounds we weren't used to hearing. Small creatures moving through the underbrush, the settling of branches, and underneath it all, something else, something I couldn't quite identify. A kind of rustling, or maybe the wind, or maybe just the acoustic properties of the mountains playing tricks on my ears. We stayed up for another couple of hours, talking and drinking from a bottle of whiskey that Tom had insisted on bringing. The conversation drifted from work to relationships to memories from college. Normal conversation, the kind of talking that friends do. Words that held back the darkness and the strangeness of being out here, away from everything we knew. By 10 o'clock, we were all exhausted. One by one, we excused ourselves and crawled into our tents. Derek and Tom were in one tent, Marcus and I in another. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to Marcus's breathing as it gradually slowed into sleep. I lay awake for a long time, staring at the nylon wall of the tent, at the shadow of the firelight dancing across it, gradually fading as the fire burned down. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up for reasons I couldn't identify. Some primal instinct maybe, something ancient in my brain that recognized danger. I lay still in the darkness, listening. Marcus was snoring softly next to me. Outside I could hear the creek running and the wind in the trees, and then I heard it, a sound that made every hair on my body stand up. It was a vocalization. That's the only word I can use to describe it. It wasn't quite a howl, though it had some qualities of that. It wasn't quite a scream, though it carried that emotional weight. It was something in between, something that my brain refused to fully process or categorize. It came from somewhere up the mountain, a long, drawn-out sound that seemed to echo off the ridges and reverberate through the valley where we were camping. I sat up in my sleeping bag, my heart hammering in my chest. The sound stopped, then started again. Higher this time, almost like a human voice pushed past the limits of normal human vocalization. It lasted for about 5 seconds, then cut off abruptly, as if whatever had made it had decided to stop mid-sound. "What the hell was that?" Marcus said in the darkness next to me. He was awake now, his own fear palpable in those 4 words. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe a mountain lion?" "Do mountain lions sound like that?" "I don't know," I repeated. "I don't know what mountain lions sound like." We didn't sleep much for the rest of the night. Derek and Tom emerged from their tent around 4:30, and both of them looked shaken. They'd heard it too. "Probably just a wild animal," Derek said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Nothing to worry about. Probably miles away. Sound carries weird in the mountains." None of us believed him, but we didn't argue. We sat around the dying campfire, adding wood, drinking instant coffee, and watching the darkness gradually recede as dawn approached. When the first light of day appeared on the eastern horizon, we all felt a collective wave of relief. The darkness had something in it, something that the daylight seemed to burn away. As we packed up camp and prepared to continue our hike, I remember thinking that we should turn back, that we should admit defeat and return to the trailhead. But I didn't say anything, and neither did anyone else. We were committed now. We'd come out here to test ourselves, and we weren't going to quit just because of some strange animal sounds. The mountains were waiting. The second day started innocently enough. The weather was still clear, though the sky had taken on a kind of metallic quality, as if it might change at any moment. The trail we were supposed to follow wound upward into the mountains, and our path was clearly marked with blazes painted on trees, rectangular marks in white, blue, and red depending on the trail. We made better time that day, our muscles having adjusted somewhat to the exertion. By noon, we'd covered 8 miles, and we were approaching our second camp spot, a location that Derek's maps indicated was near Cane Creek, another beautiful mountain stream. The atmosphere between us had shifted slightly. The fear from the night before had faded with daylight, and we were starting to feel confident again, to enjoy the experience of being out here. But around 2 o'clock, as we were hiking along a particularly steep section of trail, Derek stopped suddenly and pulled out his map. "This doesn't look right," he said, frowning at the piece of paper. "What do you mean?" Tom asked, coming to stand beside him. "The trail should fork about a quarter-mile back. We should be taking the left fork toward Cane Creek. I think we might have missed it." We all felt a wave of panic. Getting lost in these mountains was not something we were equipped to handle. It was late afternoon. The sun was already starting its descent toward the ridges, and we had no desire to be hiking in the dark. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked. "Maybe the map is just unclear." "I'm pretty sure," Derek said. "I marked it specifically. We should backtrack." So we turned around and hiked back the way we'd come for about a mile. The trail we'd been on seemed to end in a kind of deadfall area, trees that had fallen and blocked the path. We should have seen that as a sign that we'd gone the wrong way, but it didn't feel that way at the time. It felt normal. These things happened on hiking trails. We eventually found the fork that Derek was talking about, though it wasn't nearly as obvious as his map had suggested. The trail marker was mostly obscured by moss and lichen. We'd genuinely missed it. The left fork led downward into a thicker forest, and within minutes the landscape had changed significantly. We were no longer on the relatively open ridgeline. Instead, we were in a densely forested valley, where the canopy above was so thick that it felt like twilight even though it was still early afternoon. The forest here was different too, older somehow. The trees were massive, some of them clearly hundreds of years old, their trunks thicker than a man's torso, their bark dark and furrowed with age. "This is beautiful," Tom said, looking around. And it was, in an unsettling kind of way. There was a majesty to it, but there was also a sense of being in a place where humans didn't really belong, where the forest existed on its own terms and we were just visitors, tolerated but not welcome. We pushed on, trying to make up for lost time. Derek was convinced that we were back on track, and the trail seemed to be heading in the right direction according to his compass and map. By 4 o'clock, we were getting close to where we wanted to be, or at least that's what we thought. Then Marcus noticed the animals. There was no carcass, but there was blood on the rocks beside the trail. Not a little blood, a lot of it. It was dark and looked fresh, and it splattered across a small area on both sides of the path. Whatever had happened here had happened recently, maybe within the last few hours. "Keep moving," Derek said after we all stood there staring at it for a moment. "It's probably just a deer or something. Predator got it." We did keep moving, but the finding had changed something. The beautiful ancient forest now felt sinister. I found myself watching the trees more carefully, scanning the shadows between them. Several times I thought I saw movement, a flash of brown or gray in the peripheral vision, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. We found our camp spot around 4:30, and we set up quickly. This location was near Cane Creek, just like Derek's map had indicated, but it was in a different way than we'd imagined. The creek was here, that was true, but the area around it was strangely unsettling. The trees were thick and old, and the ground was carpeted with a kind of thick moss that felt spongy and wet under our boots, even though it hadn't rained. Tom and Marcus went to collect water and firewood while Derek and I set up the tents. As I was pounding in the stakes, I noticed something odd. The forest around us seemed quieter than it had been earlier in the day. Not just quiet, but actively quiet, as if the usual sounds of the forest, birds, insects, small animals, had somehow been suppressed. "Do you notice it's quiet?" I asked Derek as he came over with a roll of steaks. He paused and listened. "Yeah," he said slowly. "That is kind of weird. Usually you hear birds and stuff. Is that normal?" I didn't know enough about wilderness to know if this was normal or not. "I don't think so," Derek admitted, "but it could be the time of day. Or the season. Animals might be less active." It was a reasonable explanation, but it didn't fully convince me. The silence had a quality to it that felt deliberate, as if the forest was holding its breath. That night, we tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. We built a fire, cooked dinner, and sat around talking. But the conversation was different than it had been the night before. We were more subdued. The strange sounds we'd heard, the blood on the trail, the oppressive silence of the forest, all of it hung over us like a weight. Around 7 o'clock, as darkness was starting to fall, Tom was sitting on a log near the fire, cleaning his boots with a stick. He suddenly sat up straighter. "Did you hear that?" he said. We all went quiet. And yes, I heard it too. A clicking sound, repeated and rhythmic, coming from somewhere out in the darkness beyond our fire. It was like the sound of branches breaking, but too regular, too deliberate. "What is that?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "Probably just branches falling or something," Derek said. But I could hear the tension in his voice now. He no longer sounded confident. The clicking continued for about a minute, then stopped. We waited, but it didn't resume. "I think we should get to bed," Derek said finally. "It's been a long day. We need rest." This time, we didn't debate. We extinguished the fire as much as we dared, leaving just enough embers to provide a small amount of light, and we crawled into our tents. I'm not sure when I became aware that something was wrong. I was drifting between sleep and wakefulness, caught in that state where dreams and reality blend together, when I realized that Marcus was no longer breathing in the sleeping bag next to me. At first, I didn't process what that meant. Then panic flooded through me. I fumbled for my flashlight and turned it on. The beam swept across the tent and found Marcus's sleeping bag. He was there, his form visible under the nylon, but he wasn't moving, not at all. "Marcus?" I whispered urgently. "Marcus, wake up." I reached over and touched the sleeping bag. It felt wrong, too stiff, the shape too uniform. I unzipped it frantically and shone my light inside. The sleeping bag was empty. There was nothing but the bag itself, fully zipped closed from the outside. I threw myself out of the tent and ran to Derek and Tom's tent. I was screaming, I realize now, though I didn't fully register it at the time. "Marcus is gone," I kept saying. "Marcus is gone." Derek emerged from the tent with his flashlight, his face pale with shock. Tom was right behind him, both of them still half asleep and confused. "What are you talking about?" Derek asked. "What do you mean he's gone?" I dragged them to my tent and showed them the empty sleeping bag. Derek's face drained of all color. Tom made a sound like he was going to be sick. "Maybe he went to the bathroom," Derek said, but he was looking around wildly with his flashlight, searching the darkness. "With the tent fully zipped up?" I said. "How would he zip it from the outside?" We stood there in the darkness, the three of us, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. My mind kept reaching for rational explanations and finding none. Someone would have had to unzip the sleeping bag, climb out, exit the tent without waking me, and then come back and zip the sleeping bag back up from the outside. It was theoretically possible, I suppose. But why? Why would Marcus do that? And then, from somewhere out in the forest, we heard it. The sound from the night before, that inhuman vocalization that sounded almost like a human voice being forced past the limits of what a human voice could do. But this time it was closer, much closer, maybe a quarter mile away at most, echoing off the mountains around us. We didn't wait to hear it again. We threw what we could into our backpacks in the darkness, leaving behind the tents and most of our gear. We took only what we could carry: water, food, our flashlights, and we ran. We crashed through the darkness of the forest, our flashlights cutting narrow beams through the black. Behind us, I could hear sounds that sent ice water through my veins. Something large moving through the underbrush, breaking branches with its passage. It was moving fast, much faster than we were, unencumbered by human weakness and the awkwardness of our bodies. We couldn't move off trail because the darkness was too absolute, too complete. We could only stay on the path that had led us here and hope it would eventually lead us somewhere, anywhere, that wasn't this forest. Tom was in front, Derek behind him, me bringing up the rear. Our breath came in ragged gasps, and my legs burned with the effort of running on terrain I couldn't see properly. The sound behind us grew closer, and then I heard something that chilled me more than anything else. I heard breathing. Heavy, rhythmic breathing that was distinctly not human. There was something intelligent in the sound, something purposeful. Whatever was chasing us, it was deliberate about it. "Left!" Derek shouted from ahead of me, and I realized that the trail had forked. Tom and Derek had taken the left path, and I followed blindly, my entire focus on not falling, not tripping, not being left behind. We ran for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 or 15 minutes. Eventually, the sounds of pursuit seemed to fade slightly. Whether the thing chasing us had lost our scent or had simply given up, I didn't know. But the crushing pressure of immediate danger eased just enough that I could think beyond pure panic. "Stop," Derek gasped, and Tom and I collapsed against the nearest trees. We stood there, bent over, trying to catch our breath, our legs trembling with exertion and terror. "Where is this trail going?" Tom asked between gasps. Derek was trying to orient himself with a map and his flashlight, but his hands were shaking too badly to read it properly. "I don't know," he said. "I don't recognize this section. I think we might have gone off one of our planned routes, so we're lost," I said flatly. "Temporarily disoriented," Derek corrected, but it was a hollow attempt at humor. None of us smiled. We pressed on, moving more cautiously now, but still moving. The trail seemed to be leading us downhill, and Derek's theory was that if we could reach lower elevation, we might find a main road or another trail that would lead us back to civilization. For the next several hours, we hiked in a kind of daze. The sky had cleared enough that we could see the stars, and there was just enough light from them to complement our flashlights. We weren't running anymore, but we were moving as quickly as we dared, driven by fear and desperation. Around what I think was midnight, we heard something that made us stop dead in our tracks. It was singing. Or not singing exactly, but a kind of melodic vocalization, high-pitched and almost beautiful in a disturbing way. It came from somewhere deep in the forest, echoing off the ridges around us. But what made it truly horrifying was the sound beneath it. Underneath the melody, I could hear something that sounded almost like Marcus's voice, distorted and warped but recognizable. "No," Tom whispered. "No, no, no." The singing continued for a full minute, and then it stopped abruptly. "What was that?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "I don't know," Derek said, and I heard the break in his voice. "But whatever that is, whatever has Marcus, we can't help him. We need to focus on getting ourselves out of here." It was the most honest thing any of us had said since this nightmare began. We all knew it was true, even though admitting it felt like a betrayal. We continued hiking, and the trail eventually led us to what appeared to be a maintained pathway. The blazes on the trees were visible now, small rectangles of paint marking the way. We were on an official hiking trail again, and it felt like salvation, though it was a fragile thing. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east when we finally saw lights. They were distant, the glow of a town or city beyond the mountains. It was probably still miles away, but it was something. It was the promise of civilization, of safety, of escape. We pushed harder, driven by the proximity of salvation. My legs felt like they were made of lead. My feet were blistered raw. My backpack felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. But we moved. As the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, we began to recognize landmarks. We'd been here before, on the way in. We were going backward through our route, back toward where we'd started. That meant we were going to make it. We were going to get out. It was around 8 in the morning when we heard it again. The sound came from somewhere up the mountain behind us, that impossible vocalization that had haunted the night. But in the daylight it seemed less threatening, more distant, as if the thing that made it was limited by daylight in a way we couldn't fully understand. We didn't stop to investigate. We just kept moving. Faster than before, driven by the knowledge that daylight wouldn't last forever. We reached the trailhead at Cades Cove at around noon on November 4th. The parking lot seemed like a miracle. Cars, people, the smell of gasoline and humanity. We stumbled toward the first people we saw, 3 tourists loading a car, and I remember the way they looked at us. We were filthy, our clothes torn, our faces scratched and bloodied. We looked absolutely insane, and we sounded worse. We tried to explain, but the words came out in a jumble, incoherent and desperate. A woman called park rangers, and within an hour we were being questioned by officials in a small ranger station. We told them everything, about the sounds, about Marcus disappearing, about being chased through the forest. We described the thing as best we could, though the descriptions sounded like the delusions of people suffering from hypothermia and sleep deprivation. The rangers organized a search and rescue operation immediately. They sent teams back into the area where we'd been camping, searching for Marcus. They also organized ground searches along the trails we'd run through, looking for any trace of him. They found our abandoned campsite. They found our tents and gear. They found the blood on the rocks from the previous day. But they never found Marcus. The official search went on for 2 weeks, expanding to cover larger and larger areas of the park. But Marcus Webb was gone, swallowed by the mountains, leaving no trace except for his absence. The investigation that followed was extensive and thorough. Rangers, local law enforcement, and eventually the FBI all became involved. There were theories and hypotheses. Some suggested that Marcus had been taken by an animal, perhaps a large predator that had escaped from a facility somewhere. Others suggested that he had simply gotten lost and fallen, that we would find his body in some ravine eventually. But the search found nothing. No body, no bones, no clothing. It was as if Marcus had simply ceased to exist. We were interviewed multiple times, separately and together, by investigators trying to determine what had happened. They were skeptical, I could tell. Our story sounded impossible, but we stuck to it because it was the truth, as impossible as that truth was. The three of us went through varying degrees of trauma. Derek developed an obsession with researching what could have taken Marcus. He spent countless hours poring over cryptozoological databases, reading accounts from other hikers about strange sounds and encounters in the Smokies. Tom struggled with guilt. He kept saying that we should have done more, that we should have gone back to look for Marcus instead of running. I initially tried to return to normal life. I went back to work, tried to maintain my apartment, tried to pretend that I was okay. But I wasn't okay. None of us were. About 3 months after the incident, Derek came to me with something he'd found. He was at my apartment, and he had printouts spread across my kitchen table. They were accounts, dozens of them, from hikers and outdoorsmen describing encounters in remote areas of the Appalachian Mountains. The descriptions varied slightly, but the core elements were consistent. Strange sounds, animals found mutilated, people going missing without explanation, a sense of presence in the forest that was deliberately malevolent. "It's real," Derek said, pointing to account after account. "Whatever took Marcus, it's been doing this for a long time, for decades maybe. And it's not just in the Smokies. There are reports from all over the Appalachians." "The Wendigo," I said, reading one of the accounts that explicitly named the creature. It was a creature from Algonquian folklore, a cannibal spirit that haunted the northern forests. The accounts described it as tall, impossibly thin, with a hunger that could never be satisfied. The descriptions matched what we'd encountered in terms of the sounds it made, the way it moved through the forest, the sense of purpose and intelligence behind its actions. "I've been thinking about this," Derek continued. "What if they're territorial? What if we walked into its territory and it took one of us as a price? The indigenous peoples of the area knew about these things. They would warn travelers. They would mark off areas as unsafe. We didn't know the rules because we thought we were just taking a hike." Derek's theory was as good as any, and it was more rational than most. Over the following months, he and I became obsessed with learning everything we could about the folklore of the area, about indigenous warnings and historical accounts of encounters. What we found was deeply unsettling. There was a consistency to the accounts, spanning centuries, that was hard to dismiss. In the 1700s and 1800s, there were documented cases of settlers disappearing in the Appalachian region without explanation. In the 20th century, the accounts became less frequent, not because the thing had gone away, but because fewer people were reporting the encounters. Or perhaps those who encountered it were less likely to survive and tell the tale. Tom moved away from Tennessee about 8 months after the incident. He got a job on the West Coast and wanted to put as much distance as possible between himself and the Smoky Mountains. I understood the impulse. Part of me wanted to do the same. Derek was the last of us to try to move on with his life in the normal way. But I think part of him never really did. He became more withdrawn, more obsessed. He started making trips to the mountains, always during daylight, always in groups, trying to understand the thing we'd encountered. 2 years after the incident, Derek went missing. He'd gone to the Smokies for a day hike, something he did fairly regularly in the warmer months. He never came back. I want to say that Derek was taken by the same thing that took Marcus, but the truth is I don't know. His body was found 3 weeks later in a ravine. The official cause of death was ruled a fall, an accident. He'd been hiking alone, lost his footing, and tumbled down a steep slope. It happened to hikers sometimes. It could have been exactly that, but I found something that suggested it might have been more. In Derek's backpack, there was a journal. In the final entry, dated the day he disappeared, he had written about hearing the sounds again while hiking. He described the creature appearing at the edge of a clearing, watching him. He wrote that he was no longer afraid, that he felt almost drawn toward it. His last words were, "I think I understand now. It isn't hunting, it's calling." I've thought about that journal entry countless times over the years. I've wondered if Derek deliberately walked toward the thing, if he chose to end his suffering in that way, or if the creature possessed some kind of power over the mind, some ability to lure people toward it. The truth is I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to know. As for me, I stopped working in marketing about 2 years after the incident. I couldn't focus, couldn't maintain the facade that my life was normal. I started working in a field that allowed me to research and document accounts of strange encounters. I've interviewed dozens of people who have had experiences similar to ours, though few were as direct or as conclusive. What I've learned is that there are places in this world that don't belong entirely to our reality. The Great Smoky Mountains and the larger Appalachian region is one of those places. The mountains are older than our civilization by millions of years, and there are things there that have adapted to that ancient landscape, that understand the rules and rhythms of that place in ways that we never will. The creature we encountered, whether it was truly a Wendigo in the folkloric sense or something else entirely, something that has no name in any language, was not mindlessly hunting. It was territorial. It was establishing boundaries. When we crossed into its domain, uninvited and ignorant, it took a price. I write this account not to warn people away from hiking in the Smokies. The mountains are beautiful and majestic, and millions of people visit them safely every year. But I write this to suggest that we should approach wild places with humility. We should recognize that there are parts of this world that are not meant for us, or at least not meant for us without respect and caution. The indigenous peoples who originally inhabited these lands understood this. They had protocols, sacred places, and warnings about where it was safe to go and where it was not. We ignored those warnings. We treated the mountains as a playground, as a place to test ourselves and overcome challenges. And the mountains, or the thing that dwells in them, taught us a lesson that we should not have had to learn. Marcus is gone. Derek is gone. I remain, carrying the memory of what happened, trying to find meaning in senseless loss. If you're reading this and you're planning to hike in the Great Smoky Mountains or anywhere in the Appalachian region, please be careful, stay on marked trails, hike with others, pay attention to the sounds of the forest, and if you hear something that doesn't sound quite right, something that sounds almost but not quite like an animal, something that carries an intelligence and purpose that makes the hair on your body stand up, don't investigate. Don't try to be brave. Run. The mountains are older than us, and they're not ours.